And that came on quick. That recorded quickly. Yes, we're going to be comparing the social mission blocks of INFP and INTP. So basically what that boils down to is comparing TI and NI in INTP, FiNx, L.I.I, Strategic Accommodator, with the FI and NI in INTP, E.I.I, Diplomatic Accommodator. And we'll actually look at a little bit of things with the intellect, because there's because we're going to compare a little bit, not too much, because we don't want to get distracted by it. Because Victor's model has got the social mission, and there's some connections between social mission and the Kersey role variants, which are also like a social mission. Like, what is the person predisposed to as a career? And there's certain things in the FI description which sound like a certain Kersey role variant of reconciling people. So Leon has done some videos on Model G and got 10 times as many viewers as me. So this is, so I've sort of lined this up as we're talking about the lead functions compared to each other. So INFP on the left, INTP on the right. So what we can do is we can just talk about some of the theory of the lead function. And it's like probably the simplest thing in Model G, where it's the same as the dominant function, but it's an externality. And so it's got a wide scope of use because it's somebody's main thing. One of the things that's interesting in the way he defines it is he says something about the communicative field for the for the dominant function, which basically just means that it's really noticeable. So, and then we've got the idea of maximum energy. So it consumes the lion's share of the psyche's energy. Oh, that's it. The more powerful the first function, the more distance the communicative field covers. So people might say that I indulge TI in NE because it's like maximum energy. So it's sort of used even more than is optimum. So, and you could say that with certain people, they just stay in their lead function. In fact, Sana has said that Donald Trump just stays in SE and she sees no TI in him at all. And thinking of Sana, I will invite her to the Hangout. I have this thing here. Where is she? There she is. So I will put for the I was going to put INFP and INTP, but she doesn't like me talking like that, so I'll put E.I.I and L.I.I.
It is more accurate, to be fair.
Yes. Yes, thank you, INTP Bradley. I mean, L.I.I Bradley. Right, so yeah, so I mean, we can discuss that as a premise. Do you think that the lead function does set the goals?
That's hard to say because it doesn't do it alone. So, I mean, the whole idea of the social mission block is that they work together to set the goal, right?
Pardon? Yeah.
The whole, right.
Yeah, it's sort of used as a tool, that the creative function is used as a tool to achieve what's in the management position. So, social mission of ENTJ is entrepreneur. And so Victor thinks it's any sort of spotting opportunities and gaps in the market that's feeding the TE. And so the NE is used as a tool for the TE. Or if you think, I think the easiest example to show is ESTJ, where they use power sensing to enforce the rules.
Yeah, I think that might be the problem with both L.I.I and E.I.I is that the creative function is NI. So it's such a dominating function when it is in effect. It's hard to call it subordinate to anything. That's just my own opinion. But I do think that for better or for worse, your management function is going to be the tool you use the most. So everything is going to come out. All of the other functions are going to come out. It's going to be expressed with the management function, regardless of if it's actually defining goals or not. So I think it's more correct to say that other people will see your goals being manifested with the management function, but I'm not sure if it's actually defining the goal per se.
So we have Type Tips here with his own YouTube channel. So what do you think, Leon, when you've talked about the management function as to like how much does it set the agenda?
How much does it set the agenda?
Yeah.
I personally see it as the function that is used at a moment-by-moment basis. So it's just something that we do. So it's just done in a way. I have trouble defining like what means by setting the agenda, because I also think that the inferior function is the thing that really drives everything to the core.
Ooh.
Every type.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see it varying. So I can see it with certain INFJ and INTJ resemblers, where it's like, wow, you really are driven by the inferior function. So it's like a 5 with a strong connection to 7. Or somebody like Dario who actively works on improving FI related things and SE related things. So I suppose it depends, because some people can just sort of stay in their top function. That's sort of what Dario has said. And then other people just, they can change to appear a little bit more like their jewel type, their soul image. So I don't know if you have any. Do you have any comments, Monica, about the lead function?
Well, I read somewhere, probably it was a book from Naomi Kwang about inferior function, that this is something which people really want to do sometimes. So it could be goals which are set, but the person doesn't realize that it's somehow, so they're not very good at it. But they are still very attracted to these functions. But I don't know what is equivalent of inferior function in Socionics. Probably it won't be point of least resistance, because from what I have read, people are trying more to completely avoid those areas.
I think Dario wrote about those people in the typology community in America who are in the field of therapy. They tend to notice the break function more. And so that's why there are certain models that put the break function as the tertiary function, because they see people in a clinical context and people have issues around their break function. What do you think about that, Leon, as a life coach?
There's a way. This is just another way to make everything more confusing.
Well, yeah,
all these
it's all
functions in different
we have an
positions.
intelligent audience.
Using why is the break function? I understand that's the usual polar, right?
Yeah.
And then you're saying what do you mean by what you just said? Placing it as PP, is that something that people are very focused on? Is that what it is?
Me or Monica?
Yeah, well, anybody who knows. I guess I'm asking you.
Okay. Oh well, because I'm remembering something that Dario said about there used to be some discussion as to what the tertiary function was. Was it the same vertness as the lead function, or was it different? And so he was saying that there's a particular model, and it may have been Naomi Kwang who came up with that model where she said that the third one was, and so she flipped it and would say that the third one maybe was the break function, because in a clinical context that can be the most noticeable, I suppose.
Okay.
If it's like a weak spot that's in the consciousness of the person a lot.
Yes.
Say an INTP or an INFP suffering a lot of stress and anxiety. People might, you might think, oh, that seems to be a problem around the area of extroverted sensing.
Feeling stress and anxiety?
Yeah, I would think. Because
Mm-hmm.
the SPs tend to be good in those situations because they get sort of stimulated by it. Whereas other people, I mean, they would get stressed by other things, but usually a changing, pressurized. It's like when you see it in sports, the more pressurized the situation, certain players just play better in those situations. So,
whereas like an INFP and INTP just needs like a hot bath.
maybe. But yeah, so we've slightly digressed, and I'm going to go to the lead functions in a moment. I'm just logging in twice. There we go. Pin. There. And I have to log in with a different account, so I have to switch accounts. Because otherwise it can get a bit weird if you log in twice with the same account. So that's the management function. And then something here that Dario's written that, and when I looked at his research, there's a lot of activity in the brains, in the areas of the brain that he would say, he would use the term aid in a particular cognitive faculty that we associate with a particular function. So those areas of the brain, so for instance, in INTP, those areas of the brain that have to do with categorizing and defining and logic tend to be very active in INTP. And interestingly enough, the area of the brain that is associated with deduction is most active in ESTP. So you get these little things from Dario. So we can compare the first function, so we don't have to talk about anything. Right, okay, that's INFP in total, but I'd like to compare them next to each other. So the management function of both types. And then this is where we can compare Monica with you, Leon, as somebody who is confident of INFP, and with you, Bradley, as someone who is a little bit more confident of INTP. And so we can see the difference, because the whole point of this idea, this hangout was the idea of Monica, and it's a very good idea. And so we can see how you line up Monica with these two lead functions. So what do you think of that first one on the left in FI+?
Oh, what do you think, Ben? Is my dominant trait kindness and empathy?
Well, I think it's interesting that Ben was speaking about. Can you just give there the table?
Oh, if you click on my square, square, it will stay on.
Yeah, great. I would say that. Well, you said that it's very similar, those functions, how are defined in Socionics to how are defined in MBTI. And I would say that it's the first point, its dominant trait is kindness and empathy, that it's something what probably maybe is stereotypically seen as people who are FE in MBTI, because the result will be harmony. And yeah, and even other points here should be more seen stereotypically as FE in MBTI, I would say, because the result is it's harmony.
Right.
I know that you didn't want to hear this comparison.
No, I am perfectly fine to hear this, Monica, because it actually reminds me of certain things where I can because yes, they are different, but I think they end up at the same place. So I would say that FE is more sympathy and FI is more empathy, because empathy is something I looked at a lot because of the book Story by Robert McKee, because he talked about the connection between the audience and the protagonist, and he wrote a whole chapter on the audience bond. And so that it was about the perception of similarity between the audience and the protagonist. And he talked about Macbeth, and he was saying that the audience could empathize with Macbeth because they could connect over the guilt. So empathy to me is more of an FI thing, where you are sort of having a bond and perceiving a commonality with somebody, things in common on a values and beliefs level. Now, so I'll ask Leon now, because this is the kind of thing that he's probably done loads of videos on. What do you think about that, Leon, about empathy?
Okay.
Is it FI or FE?
Both extrovert feelers and introvert feelers think a lot about people.
Yeah.
FI, talk to other INTPs, often the relationship to people is kind of on the forefront of their mind. They're thinking about a lot of their past relationships, and then they're thinking about it a lot. INTPs probably, when they come across someone who shares certain values, they could really resonate with them, with these people, then they want to get in close contact.
Yeah.
As in I'm trying to think about what you said about necessarily feeling a similarity, because maybe that could be mitigated by extrovert intuition. Extrovert intuition being able to see a different point of view. So you're trying to enter in a position of another person. Say you want to create a character for a play.
Yeah.
Then you want to use extrovert intuition. So if INFP balances their FI with any, then the any would be able to very, in a sophisticated way, be able to understand another viewpoint. If they're in their FI more, then maybe they'll project their own personality or emotion onto another.
Yeah. In terms of, I always bring this up in terms of FI because it's related a little bit to rapport, and I see this being very important to FPs. So I think I've shown this to Monica before. I can't quite remember. So what I'll do is I'll ask you, Monica. So when you read this, what did you think of it?
Well, I thought that I just have a comment to the previous sentence of
Go ahead.
that probably it really depends on how someone defines empathy, because if it's about understanding people, it can be also reached by analysis, which can be really more like a thinking thinking function probably.
I'll just say.
I mean, it can be reached by many different ways, but the result we'll see as empathy. But maybe someone is just curious and someone just want to learn more about people and their system of thoughts, which will like as empathy, because you will ask questions and you will do like active listening practices. I would say it really is about motivation a lot.
Yeah. Catherine Farber did an MP3 that was interesting, where she talked about 3 kinds of empathy: emotional empathy, cognitive empathy. And what made me think of that was when you said there, Monica, about understanding people, maybe from like more of a TI point of view. And then physiological empathy. This is more about those people who can really read body language very well, and so can sort of get inside someone's emotional state. So Morgan has talked about getting a vibe of somebody's emotions. So that's like from the ESTP point of view of it. I asked Dario I asked Dario, is ESTP the best type as reading body language? And he said it's one of the 2 best types, and the other one's ENFP. So he thinks the ESTP and the ENFP are the best at reading body language. This thing of rapport, it's just that the way I define FI is I really go with the Jungian version, where it's subjective feeling, and people connect with somebody else if they feel that they've met. I'll ask Leon about it, because for the INFP is finding your soulmate, and someone like that, where they have that connection on values and beliefs. Is that very important now?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. I just kind of got reminded of I was kind of working on this project with the ESTP. We're kind of like it was schoolwork, by the way, but we were supposed to write this play, and he says we need to add. He said we need to add some extra fluff to this play, right? And I started to tell, oh, maybe we could create like this really like magical story, like something like these two people meet from different countries in the world, and they meet together in another country, and he says no, I don't mean like magical. Because when I heard fluff, I heard like magical, and then what he heard was fluff, meaning literally. He took it literally as fluff, just adding extra stuff into the play.
In terms of what Monica said there about the similarity between socionics, ethics of relations, and FE, and Sanna's made a similar point. What I've just written here is ethics of relations is almost like the FI version of what FE does. So it's almost like using the FI to judge distance, psychological distance, about how people feel about a relationship. And then from the outside, that looks like, oh, this person's good with people. They can sort of judge the relationship and focus on other people. So it's almost, it has the same effect as FE, but the root is more subjective. So there are similarities. I just think there's different roots.
Yeah, they're different. They're good with people in different ways. I think like FE is more good with people in an obvious way. So FI is able to keep stable relations with everybody. Yeah,
and I think an INFP is accommodator. ENFP is informing. The thing is with the ENFP, they also have strong FE. They can be a very expressive people.
Yes.
So it's less clear with them. But with, I think the sense of connection is very important to INFPs. And
well, I think there are some similarities also with Enneagram Type 4 and to some context with to some extent also with maybe all instinctual brains which are sexual or one-to-one.
Yes, good point. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Monica, about the similarities with the 4?
I can, but we are at the first point. I hope we have enough time to do that, but I can tell you something about Enneagram 4.
Yeah, because the reason why is because there's an overlap with FI in that Enneagram 4 almost accentuates that aspect of FI, which is about personal identity. Because that seems to be a part of FI, someone's personal identity. And the different, say, INFPs of different Enneagram type would sort of emphasize rather different aspects of FI. So maybe with a Type 9, it might be the relations part of FI and like the harmonizing part. And with the 4, it might be, again, the identity part. With the 1, it might be more of the ethical part. I think it would be possible. There might be an INFP out there that also is very much like a 2. I don't rule that out as a possibility.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely definitely INFPs who are 2s.
Yeah.
So, and I believe a lot of INFP could look outwardly as a 2.
Yeah.
Or a FI plus at least.
Yeah, because it depends on how you see the 2, like how much on acceptance and approval. This is more like the beta quadrant ST version of FE, which is like reading people and like calibrating them, which is like somebody gives a look when they're upset, and so they go back. I know that look. That look is when someone's upset. So it's like you could have the best body language reading person in the world, but then you could also have a mother of a child, and they've known them 20 years, and they know that particular person better than, say, the best body language reading expert in the world, because you could say that that person has calibrated their body language in that they know what it means based on a huge level of past experience. And so Jonathan
this can be learned.
Yeah, Jonathan
so it can be totally confusing.
Jonathan gave the example of his mother saying to him sometimes, "Oh, you just need a nap." And so let's get back on target. So yeah, I can say that you I've not seen anything from you that sort of says, "Oh no, she's not kind or empathetic." I've not nothing to get me out of that viewpoint. So we can. So how true of that is you, Leon? I mean, do you want to blow your own like kindness
horn?
How exactly are you kind? How is that shown through actions?
How kindness, right?
Yeah.
The first thing would be the as you mentioned, the empathy, right? But a lot of it's kind of like processed inwardly, right? So it kind of mixes with introverted intuition, meaning I kind of think about a lot about the effect of words. So the words potentially having a certain kind of consequence down the line. So that's one way. I kind of believe in, like, I do keep on good term, like the third point, good terms with everybody, meaning I try to, there's kind of a mix of FINI there. So I'm kind of, it has to do with the introverted intuition kind of carefulness, being kind of careful and not wanting to like cause a situation which would, as you said, like cause a lot of stress. It's a lot of stress if the kind of like the equilibrium is kind of broken, and that kind of would destroy the introverted sensing state of stability. So in order to do that is to be on good terms with people and to kind of have a lot of forethought when working with others.
When you're talking about that, because that goes a little bit with accommodating. So you can see part of the reason why, from a functional point of view, you could ask yourself, okay, why are INFPs and INTPs accommodating? We can say with INFP, they've got the ethics of relations there, and also avoiding conflict with the SE break. And you can say with INTP, well, they're about the options and are not really pushing anyone towards one option, and their SE break. You could say with ISFJ, well, they're sort of have a focus towards other people's bodily needs and what's good for them, and maybe again empathize and numb on a sort of physiological level, but also emotional as well. But then you could say that they are SE ignoring. And then suppose when it comes to ISFP, it's a little bit different in that their main function is an accommodating function in terms of FI, but they can get to that point where it's like the cat that turns and shows its claws with ISFP. So I suppose what you could say is ISFP is accommodating for an SP.
There's that thing about kindness. So like the whole like, well, take for example, like there's that, you know, Christian ethic where you kind of turn the other cheek.
Yeah.
So I kind of see INFPs doing that to like kind of a silly extent. Meaning like someone like I don't know, it's like kind of like if someone is kind of at first treating you badly, then there's two steps. One is either to keep treating them kindly back, right? Or the other one is to kind of withdraw. So those are the two strategies.
Right. So we have Bradley here, and he's having some technical difficulties, so he may or may not be able to be heard. And So you're somebody, Brad, who in the past has sat on the fence between, although you were quite clear about being L.I.I in Socionics, although you're related to INFP in MBTI. So when you look at these things in that FI box on the left, which bits do you relate to there?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, all of them somewhat, but in particular, should I say, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, and 6 for sure. 3 sort of. I do stay in good terms with everyone, but I'm not actively trying to do that. So if the if the situation comes up where you know the relationship is in question, then I will try to stay in good terms with it. But I'm not trying to like proactively like make sure the good terms are like it's not at the forefront of my mind. It's just at just comes into my mind when the opportunities arise. So just like capitalizing opportunities to be in good terms, but not necessarily making those opportunities happen. If that makes sense. But I mean, I also have like I have 9 in my tri-type, in my Enneagram tri-type.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's stereotypically related to like the feeling preference, and a lot of the empathetic behavior and sort of like the self-erasing of the 9. And I'm not saying self-erasing in like a bad way, just in like in a very permissive, open way. Is I very much do all of those things. So in terms of like me identifying with INFP and MBTI, that's because I'm FI. I mean, we sort of already talked about this, but FI and FB sort of defined a little bit differently between Socionics and MBTI. So they actually go as far as to say the official stance of the MBTI feeling function is that it's based on values and not emotions.
Right.
Whereas you have Socionics, which is literally calls FE, ethics of emotions. So that in itself is like can cause a lot of non-cross compatibility when people are identifying as different types in each system. And same with FI being harmony seeking in Socionics and FE being harmony seeking in MBTI. So
yeah, I was just going to say that when you look at the Kersey profiles, he sees the NFPs as being harmony seeking, as mediators. So, and of course, Kersey doesn't do functions. And of course, I'm not really familiar with MBTI profiles because I compare the Kersey profiles to the Socionics profiles. And we can see a bit of that later on about the Kersey INFP really is like this. These things on here, like I've put there for reconciling conflictors. One thing I'll say, a theme that's come up with in Victor's model, the functional reason why INFP has kind and empathy is that they're launched by the perception of suffering in others. And I suppose a person who sort of embodies this is Hannah through her nursing. So they're launched by seeing suffering and discomfort in others. Although for her, it's more on the emotional level, or on the psychological level.
I will add that this seems somewhat relevant. Is that I actually I talked to a good INFP friend of mine yesterday, and she, for some reason, we were talking about how I'm very likable, and she said something which strikes me as a very FI comment to say. She said that people want to like you, not necessarily me. She said to me that people want to like me, and she didn't necessarily mean that people like me, but just that people want to like me.
Right.
And I can sort of see where she's coming from, but at the same time, that's not something that I could ever think up myself. So,
so good. We're managing to hold 5 viewers. So in particular, so Bradley, when you say they're 4 and 5, both of those are quite accommodating, and also INTP is an accommodator. or behind the scenes in Berens. And Berens has something about that the behind the scenes people tend to want to integrate things. So maybe she would put something like the INFP wants to integrate different points of view, or maybe she's like picking up on a bit of an Enneagram 9 theme there, where they're like their focus is other people's positions and points of view. So I'll go back to you, Monica. Which particular bullet points there, which particular numbers sort of like are worthy of commenting on for you?
Well, my favorite point 9, 1 again. Well, for me, kindness is also about, it's something like I don't want others to be treated as I don't want to be treated, because I can relate to a feeling which this person could have. So I try to avoid it. So for me, this kindness is connected to this, because I don't want this person to have possible terrible feelings.
So
that I have to sort of analyze and understand the situation and the person first to receive to this conclusion. So I think it really can be connected to the first point of TI in this chart.
Yeah, and what you said there about it's from a subjective point of view. So like, I have been through this, I don't want them to go through a similar experience. So you can see the subjective focus of it. This is why I go to Carl Jung's definition of FI, subjective feeling.
Yeah, that's true, that they don't have to feel this way. It's only how I think they could be feeling, which is based on understanding to those people.
There's certain concepts to look at that I think have a bearing on FI, and there's a word called vicarious, which is sort of imaginatively living through another person. And there are people that they have a certain character in a novel or a film that they really strongly relate to. And they might even say, yeah, he's me. And they have that strong connection.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people feels like this with me. Right. And sometimes it's very surprising for me.
Right.
Well, then the second point, I'm not sure if I'm able to ease their emotional tension. I like to do that, but I also try to, I'm not sure if I'm just someone who cheers others up. I don't like to do that. And I also don't like to be cheered myself, because I think that it's more important to another person to feel heard and to feel like they are, they can live their emotions through and they can show them. So I really try to just let them free, explain what they want. But sometimes it doesn't have to necessarily get their emotions better. Sometimes it can get worse, of course. So
yeah, that sounds
that's very FI, right? It's like working with the real emotions.
It's also like, from a Kersey point of view, proactive enterprise and reactive inquiry, where you're taking the information. We have Sana here as the sole person who is directive. So she may here she comes. She's online. So what do you think, Sana, of those things in that on that box on the left, FI plus?
You mean what do I relate to?
Yeah. And how are you different from that?
You want me to just go through all of them? Or
yeah, go on then. We can see the contrast.
Okay. One, those are things that I do appreciate, but I think I will push if I have to. It's not like I will necessarily be kind if I feel that, and not for its own sake. It's more like a tool. I don't know if that makes sense. If I'm dealing with someone who's stepping on me, I'm not going to be very kind, I think. But it depends, because I'm also very shy in a lot of cases. So partially. Two, I think I kind of do that. I mean, it's what people seem to think, but I don't really I can't really observe it myself. But I think it kind of happens when people come to me and they ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
3, it's kind of like 1. I'm going to try and be in good terms with people, but if they're not worthy, then I don't care. 4, yes, I think so. 5, kind of. It depends.
Yep.
I don't perceive myself as particularly patient, but I think I kind of am. I just don't feel like it. Like I will wait for the right moment.
Right.
Doesn't bottle up. I absolutely, definitely bottle up anger, and that does not. But I also forgive people. I think, to be honest, I think the 6, for me at least, is more FE because has to do with emotions. So I don't know why it's here. Maybe the forgiving part.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I think so too. I feel like I also bottle up anger. Maybe because this is written from an outside perspective, it looks like we're not because we're forgiving.
Yeah, maybe it's the lack
it
of
looks like we're like, okay, yeah.
Sometimes in these I've not moved that one around, but some of them I do come across those ones. Now, to be honest, one of these ones in the TI minus, I actually moved around from the original because it was like such an outlier, and actually it wasn't in the TI, it was with the NI and the NE. I switched one around because originally Victor wrote in the NI section, sees connections between fields that are far removed from each other, and I thought, come on, that's a mistake, that should be in the NE box. And then in the NE box he had, when thinks about something will enter a brief trance, and I think, come on, that's not NE, that's NI. So I switched those two around. So it was a little bit cheeky of me, but you know, I think most people would agree that
does Victor know that you did that?
Well, he knows that I make these little changes, so but I'm honest about it. I run the profiles by him.
Something Hannah and Monica talking about, and it's what is it? When people come to you, then you kind of like deal with the kind of like the real emotions of it. First of all, and second one is like you giving off the vibe of somehow giving off the vibes of when people approach you and they could be like a stranger, they look at you, they're like, I'm going to divulge my life story to you, and I'm like, you just met me, but okay.
Yes. So Sana, have you got?
Well, I'm sorry. I just would like to add, Leon, that it wasn't like this always.
Okay.
I think I somehow developed my skills, and I started to look like someone who is very accepting somehow. But as a children, I was totally different, and a lot of people's skills are learned. I think so.
Okay. How do you see yourself different before?
Well, definitely, I was more self-sufficient. I was more just me and my computer games and encyclopedias, and I really didn't need a lot of people, you know, as a children. And I think I wasn't so outwardly empathetic, and I had to be seen as very reserved and very hard to approach, which changed somehow because I decided to focus on it. And I was very surprised, and it's connected to point 3 in that chart, that you said I look smooth in a conversation, but it's really how I don't feel. It probably it sees like it outwardly, but inwardly it's very draining for me to act like this. So I try to have a good relations to everyone, but it's exhausting for me, and I would better to be alone.
Well,
And,
it sounds like you really worked on yourself. Like you really like developed some skills. I'm just kind of curious. I just thought like maybe like you have like introverted feeling, but it was kind of like locked inside. Like you maybe had like a sensitive nature and a way, an empathetic nature, but you at first couldn't find a way to communicate it, but you learned how to do it, and you seem like the people around you really benefit from it. Is that something?
well, I would say I was always overly sensitive and empathetic also to inanimate objects and to and it was also too much. And
Yeah.
however, I didn't know how to express that probably, so I had to learn it.
Yeah, I would say that's very much if you look at Carl Jung's definition of introverted feeling, how inside it feels a lot, but outside it could appear cold. So you probably like carry the weight of the world of your shoulders on the weight of the world on your shoulders. So, but you so you have a lot of empathy, but you've learned to find a way to kind of communicate it too.
Yeah, I would say that outwardly I look like very FE in terms of MBTI functions.
Yeah.
And well, I will stop talking right now. So go on.
I'll just say, because Sanna's got to leave soon, we could quickly go through.
Yeah, of course.
So Sanna, could you please talk about the numbers and the NI minus?
I didn't even read them yet.
Okay, take your time.
I just wanted to point out about the, because I didn't finish with the FI. Okay. I just wanted to point out that I do bottle up anger, but I think it's, I can only do it for so long before it kind of bursts out. So I suppose that's partially, and I do forgive people, and I do help people if they ask for help. So, NI, yes. 2, yes. Yes. I mean, this is just, yeah, this is basic NI. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, it's just like
except for 6. If I don't have to be on time, I'm not gonna be on time. But that's like a choice. It's not. It's a value thing. Like, do I need to do it, or would I?
Oh, being on time. You said. Right. I think we all talked about this before. Like we're like, I don't know if we're all like really on time.
It's like if you look at the function in isolation, you would think, oh, they have a good sense of time. But then you can say, well, if you consider the other functions, well, E.I.I has this demonstrative NE that means they can get distracted, or you could say, and weak value TE, and you could say, well, I their TE break, so they can have a problem with schedules and things. Even
it's
though
not that. It's not that at all. Then it's not. It's not about having trouble with it. It's more like I don't have to do this, and I'd much rather be doing something else. So I'll get there when I get there. Right, well, it's a matter of whether it's needed.
Right. So, but maybe the TE. Okay, maybe the TE people schedule things, and so the things that they go to are important to them, and maybe for those kind of things. So I'm just sort of giving the example of, if you look at the function in isolation, then you would deduce from the function, oh, these people are good at arriving on time. But I'm just saying that because of other things within the types, that can mitigate that. So the NE and INFP.
Oh, I just want to make an announcement. I'm gonna I'll be back soon. I just need to go briefly.
That's okay, Leon.
I need to get my laptop charged. But I just also want to comment, what's missing in FI is that people who are dominant introvert feelers are clingy. Meaning if we find some special people we want to, or if we think someone is special, we're going to be want to be clingy around them. Anyway, I'll be headed back.
Maybe they're like a sexual 4. I can imagine that. Now, what I was going to do is I was going to look at TI next. But I thought, well, because Sanna has to we haven't talked for a while, I thought, well, let's change it up and go straight to the NI, and now because we are in the creative position, actually I want to talk about FI because there's certain things, because I got out of order, but I went out of order to adapt. So there's certain things on the left in the FI plus relate to certain things in Kersey, and we're not going to go through all of this, but the things that it talks about with the role of mediators, not, here we go, our teachers, that's a directive role. So yeah, if we, diplomatic advocates, is that's both of them. Yes. Yeah. And so we can see what we think of this. So at this point, what he meant by probing was probing for options. And then he changed it in personology when he was talking about the directive types, was probing for options to advance. So he was using the word in a different way. So if you read through that, Monica, you can let me know whether you think that's true. You don't have to read it out loud, but just comment on, I'd like you to comment on certain bits that are worthy of comment. Go on, Mark.
Yeah, I would say the first part, definitely. I try to give
Wait a minute, this is a...
Right, so I'll just say that, so MBTI, we've gone over this, MBTI and Socionics have different definitions of FI, but Kersey doesn't do functions, and to me, this sounds like ethics of relations.
Yeah, I would say that mediator itself, only the name mediator seems more like seeking harmony and being FE in MBTI. And
then we've got there what we looked at before, rapport and understanding between people.
yeah.
So, because it's an informing role rather than a directive role. Because with ENFJ and INFJ, Kersey versions of those, they are about directing people.
I'm definitely not directive, so
No. Yeah.
so this is a good fit for me.
Yeah, so it's like what was written in there with the FI plus about bringing together and reconciling. Elena put conflictors. Kersey would have put alienates, reconciling alienates. So we've got here bringing people together. Again, it's all there. It's about relations.
Yeah, I would say it's also something what probably Enneagram type 9 would do more.
Yeah. Speaking of that, on Catherine Farber's Enneacards test for Enneagram type 9, she actually wrote Accommodator on there. So yeah, we're not going to spend too long on this because we're just going to look at, we're not going to look at champion, we're going to look at the one for healers, because this is the name for INFP. So if you read through that, Monica, please comment on how well or not you relate to that.
Well, the first sentence, I'm definitely caring more about their psychological and mental needs than their health, like in physical sense. I'm not very good at providing physical care for others and even for me. Yeah,
he's not meaning healing in terms of like on an SFJ level.
Oh yeah.
psychological healing.
Yeah. But at first, maybe it's necessary to go to more depths when you are trying to help someone, so it can temporarily get worse because a lot of bad emotions and feelings are going to pop up. But at the end of it,
I mean,
they're actually more probably healthy because of it.
I mean, this bit here, making whole a divided self. That is very FI and NF. The forgiveness thing that was mentioned by Victor in FI+, mending relationships between people. Again, it sounds ethics of relations. And then you've got ethical view of events, and then a sense of mission. Although that's a little bit more, maybe a little bit with the NI there, although that also applies to all NFs, a sense of mission. So you can see here I was a little bit different in Kersey from MBTI, and there's a little bit more like Socionics with quite a few of the profiles.
Hello, hello.
Oh, Leon, you're back. So,
hello. Hey.
Yes, it's sound test. So, Mr. Healer. So
Yes.
What do you think of this on screen here? Do you relate to this?
Wait, let me work on something first.
Okay.
I'll look at the screen shortly.
Okay, and I'll actually go back to the other bits on the previous page, because I think this is a key point of similarity between the informing role of mediator, being like ethics of relations. And so there you go, Leon.
Okay. So I'm reading this?
Yeah, if you want to read it out loud and stop and comment, then we've not got dead air.
The probing idealists those who prefer open-ended experience and who tend to give information rather than issue directives take the role of advocate. To the idealist, advocating is literally giving voice to views and positions. Belief in causes, ideas that people often can't put into words for themselves in order to nurture rapport and understanding between people. Advocates act on behalf of others, in support of others, serving as their clients, activists, adherent, ambassador, enthusiast, exponent, proponent, supporter. Whenever speaking up and standing up for others can help resolve differences and bring about justice. As with mentoring, there are other less honorable kinds of advocating. For example, propagandizing and proselytizing, which emphasize one side against the other. But the NF's diplomatic advocating is most often done with the hope of mediating disputes and bringing people together. Okay.
I think the next one on the next page is more about, because that's about NFPs in general, or themes of them. And so if you go through this is more, I think, up your street.
Committed to personal reconciliation, that is to preserving or restoring, as the case may be, the wholeness and health of those near and dear to them. Okay. Forgiveness. Oh, am I just reading the highlighted?
Yeah, if you read through all of it and stop whenever you like to comment.
Oh, okay. I could comment on things.
Yes,
okay.
that's the main.
That's helpful. Yeah, this was also the thing that I didn't know if you want me to analyze the text or to just say me to relate it. So I will inspire now by Leon and his answers.
Oh, okay. Am I continuing on? Okay. So healers are spiritual go-betweens acting as the bridge between conflicting factions with the hope of assisting others to find health through inner peace. In this way, healing is a matter of acceptance, accommodation, reconciliation, forgiveness, resolution, reunification, all in the interest of mending relationships between people and making the whole a divided self.
So I'll stop you there. Is that true for you? What do you think of what you've read so far?
Can I go to the first page again?
Okay, yes, I will go to the previous page.
Okay.
I think it's that one, and it's down there. There we go, diplomatic advocates.
Activist is an interesting word. Maybe there's some sort of correspondence with Enneagram too,
Yeah.
as well. Like Enneagram, if someone is type 1, I'm more like an ambassador.
Mm.
So activist, that's not quite the word. Like behind, if I'm doing an ambassador thing, what's behind it is kind of like an activist role, but I'm not like, I don't do it by like actively champion something. I guess it's kind of a different thing I do.
So I'll just remind people that these role variants are sort of like things which NFs are predisposed to but don't have to do. They're sort of the themes.
Yeah. Yes. We all have to do this from now on. It's all obligatory. Okay. Enthusiast. Okay. Exporter. Proponent. I do definitely like if it is an individual, I would support them and advocate for them. Solve differences and bring about justice. Maybe justice it's kind of hard to like know exactly what everything is about because yes, I guess justice would be behind it, but when I think about justice, I could also think of someone who's T dominant, for example. That's more of a descriptor, or justice, or it could be someone who's more just type 1 in general. It could be like a ENFP looking for justice, like when they talk about that kind of topic. Okay, and they mention about all these negative aspects. I better keep all these motives hidden.
Yes.
Well, about the justice thing, I think that also David Kersey was speaking about how idealists and guardians are taking justice differently. It was also interesting. If you want to say something about it, then.
No, I thought you might want to say something about that. Oh, from what he said on Thursday. Okay. Yeah, we had a private hangout, folks, with David Mark Kersey, the son. And so, yes, it's so... To guardians, their sense of justice is going to be very much what they've been taught, what is conventional to them. So it's extending those values that they are familiar with, the sort of the social conventions that have supported them. So, for instance, these days you can have guardians that, and if they're from a particular background, they're very much in favor of the welfare state and various things, and they would be conservative in trying to conserve social things that maybe the SJs 50 years before that would have called them liberal for. So it's and also because the SJs are drawn towards safety, they like that security aspect of various things. And so what I'm sort of saying is, to them, justice is what they are used to, what is a conventional sense of justice. And so they tend to buy into a lot into law and order. Again, because of safety, they like law and order. They tend to respect the police, unless they're from a culture where their particular subculture doesn't respect the police. Yeah, there's an interesting theme with this. There's an episode of Homicide: Life on the Street with Al Giardello, who was sort of half black, half Italian. And the episode was called Black and Blue. What is he loyal to, his race or to the force? And so there are these very, very interesting stories about him as an ESTJ policeman, and him also as a black man, and him talking about what it was like in the 60s to become a black officer in Baltimore, when most of them were sort of like white Irish Americans, and him saying like, well, he wanted to do it to be as part of his community. And like somebody, a young black lady officer questioned him on not being able to stand up, and he really stood up to look. You don't know what it was like in the 60s. So lots of brilliant themes in Homicide: Life on the Streets, where the SJ themes and most of the temperaments, really it's just the SPs and the SJs. They don't really do the intuitives. The only intuitive is Munch, who's ENTP, John Munch, and he's been in more television episodes than any other character in American history outside of soaps. So if you want to see things, if you want to see the SP temperament and the SJ temperament in non-stereotypical ways, then watch Homicide: Life on the Street, which was based on real people and a real police department in Baltimore, because it was based on a book written by Neil Simon. I think it was Neil Simon, because I might get it mixed up with a songwriter. And then he worked on The Wire, I think, Neil Simon. And it was called something like Homicide: A Life on the Killing Spree, something like that. And so he turned that book into a series, because he was a crime reporter for a paper in Boston. Not in Boston, in Baltimore. The Baltimore Sun, I think. So getting back to this thing here, try and squeeze Leon for some more details.
Squeeze me.
Yeah, so what is this thing about? Like, come on, this is NF goal, making whole of a divided self. I mean, is that what you go for in life coaching? Do you go to do these sort of things?
That's definitely absolutely true. Yeah, that aspect of, well, I like to coach people. Like, I kind of use the method of Gestalt therapy, and I don't know if this is necessarily like only NFPs do.
Oh, come on. This is interesting because
this is, yeah.
The reason why it's interesting is Kersey came from that school of the Gestalt. So what is Gestalt?
Yes. Yeah, Gestalt. Well, one aspect of it is that you're made up of different selves, like different parts of yourselves, and they're not always working together. They're not always cohesive. And the idea is to kind of bring awareness to these different parts of you, and kind of bring them to the table and get them to talk to one another. So one thing I do is I kind of ask people to talk to a certain aspect of themselves. So they can talk to the part of themselves that is angry or upset or anxious, for example. So I get them to talk to that part of them and imagine that they're sitting across from them, and talk to that side which is angry or anxious, and then switch over to the other side. So now you're pretending to be the anxious or angry part of yourself, and then that side repeats back what you say, and then expresses itself. So the anxious side or angry side of yourself also expresses how they feel. So what this means is that we tend to kind of stonewall. We build a wall between us and the parts of ourselves that may feel differently from what feels good to us. So we may not like the angry part of ourselves. We may not like the anxious part of ourselves, but we don't form a way to communicate with that aspect of ourselves. So this idea is to be able to talk to that aspect of themselves, talk to them like they're another person.
Right, so Leon, a lot of this has been done in NLP, and they took it a little bit further by having the 6-step reframe, where there was a part of the person that was it's doing this, but it's like talking to the person with an unconscious thing. It's quite complicated to explain, and to be honest, I'm not articulate enough on the subject to be able to explain it, because it's quite methodical because it's a certain process to show whether they're talking to the unconscious in terms of an old coping mechanism that used to work but is now holding the person back.
Yes.
So
that sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah. So
it's probably like, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom Condon talked about that with old coping mechanisms with Enneagram people holding them back. So, for example, he talked about a young child that maybe was in a position of a surrogate parent and then became a little bit 3-ish and stuck in that role. Or maybe there was a lot of violence around them at the time. And so what they came up with to defend them then is no longer relevant. But
that's true.
What you were saying there about parts therapy, there was also, this came from Fritz Perls, who was the Gestalt therapist. and he was modeled by the Bandler and Grinder in NLP.
Yes.
And they said they had this thing where they would like talk to a chair, and Bandler thought that was weird.
Yes.
There was that person there. Now, apparently Bandler, I don't know if he was lying, because he is the STP, Chicky Dicky Bandler, I call him. And he talked about, in terms of this parts therapy, he said that he got somebody up against the wall because he was so angry, because when he did a parts therapy with somebody, he had them give those different parts names. And he thought,
Yes.
no, you don't want to go down that route, because you'll get dissociative identity disorder, where all of these parts become separate identities in somebody. So have you sort of been taught the sort of danger of that with the parts therapy?
Well, yeah, I guess it's important to assess the client, like if they're like in the state where they're susceptible. In most cases, you know what you mentioned about, there's a part of you that is acting a certain way unconsciously in order to protect you. Yeah. And the thing is, if you put a name to it, like if you give it like almost like a person's name, it makes it less like ominous, like this force that you can't control. It's more like, hey, this this part of you is named Adam, for example. So it's more like, oh, it's almost like more personable, and it's easier to deal with in a way. But it's definitely, you have to kind of like check out the state of the client.
Yeah. And Sally would say something very similar. You'd be a good person to join the counselling hangout that we're being organising with Raquel when she's free. So I think I've asked you about this, Monica. I can't quite remember. Did I ask you about this, like making person whole and divided self stuff? Have you ever done that with other people?
I think you did.
Right. Okay. Yes. We will move back. We will move back, because this is not the diplomatic intellect hangout. Where is it? Oh, it's in the same thing. I've got to go up here. So, oh yeah. So we're now going on to the creative position, which is this one. So the idea is it uses just as much energy as necessary for the task, because it's a tool. It's not something which is overindulged. There we go. So it's used as a tool, not as something that the person is. And again, it's an externality. So it's wide scope of use, because it's the same vertness as the overall vertness of the person. This is some detail on the creative function. So implements or creates, the function is flexible and unconventional, which is also associated with creativity. Yes, what is done rather than what is thought and or said. And then there's some information there about what Dario has observed with EEG activity that I won't go into. This is some idea about what the types are good at with the creative function. And so, Leon, as a typological person of high esteem on YouTube, do you think this is true? Because I think you've done a similar video about this particular function in the types.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, creative, because I know different systems call the creative function.
Yeah, this is Model G, so it would be
Model G, yeah. Okay. Okay, and you are good at SC, SC, ESFJ, can use emotional pressure. Yeah, so in what way would you like me to comment on these?
Well, is it true? Because this is sort of just something that I sort of put in my own words. I'm just wondering if you agree with them.
I mean, yeah, I would agree. It's like if you compare like ESFJ with an ISFJ or ESTJ with an ISTJ. If you take the very first example of ESXX types are good at SC.
Yeah.
So ESFJs, they use a lot more pressure. Like they really push you. They can almost like grab your arm and get you to do something.
I'll just say one thing, is that
yes,
quite a few times male ESFJs may appear ESTJ.
Male ESFJs could appear ES. Do you want to explain?
Well, because just the social conventions of like the masculinity and the not wanting to show as much the feeling side. There are some people who are clearly male ESFJs, but I suppose those people who are close, because Guardians are about what is the social convention of what it is to be a man, where they might like tone down on their feelings. Because Jeff has talked about this, that he feels that society goes against men who are feelers, against women who are thinkers.
I could see that. So they kind of use their FE to take on the role of whoever conventional masculine role is, right?
Yeah, gender roles. Yeah.
So I just thought about kind of a funny example of I just remember ESFJs and how they would, if they want you to do something, they have this thing where they kind of combine extrovert feeling and extrovert sensing. So they say, okay, can you do this for me just one more time, right? And you do it, and it said, oh, just one more time, just one more time. So I just and that's how they get you to keep doing it over and over. So for example, I had a band teacher who's a male ESFJ, and then he says, okay, we're going to practice this one more time. He says, oh, just one more time. So if it's just one more time, everyone would do it. But then he says, just one more time, just one more time, just one more time. after that, and therefore he just got us to practice like 10 times.
Yeah, so it's like I suppose, yeah, ENFJ, because some of these I'd known already from Victor, and then some of them I had to sort of put in my own words. What about that one with the ISXX types? Do you think they all have? I think that's true, that they all have good visual memories.
The only way we could do the very active occipital lobes is if we do the EEG scan. Is that something that's been done?
Yeah, Dario has shown that from looking at the EEG, like the back of the brain is very active, and that's associated with the visual cortex.
Yeah,
part of the brain. And I think
that's the thing. I'm basically like a blind person. That's the difference between me and them.
Yeah, ISFP and INFP. Yeah.
Yeah. SI, active occipital lobes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, you agree with them. So, well, we'll move on unless you want some particular thing strikes itself as out of place.
I think that's good.
Yeah, because I think you talked about how all the types use NI, all the IN types, all the intuitive introverts use NI. You did that in a video, so I suggest people.
Yeah, I did some video on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So some other things.
I'm just gonna say that from now on. So when you ask me, I'll be like, everybody, just watch my video.
Yeah, if you want to do that, if there's a thing where it's like I've done a video on this, please mention it, because and then this is just the idea of the creative functions dark side. The audience can see that. Don't spend. So, for instance, this idea that they could become overbearing with the SE, and the EJs, maybe misguided with the NE. So with this, now this really is me sort of doing my own TI and coming up with my own stuff. So this might be a little bit hit and miss. But I do think that INTPs and INFPs can become logocentric. Where they get
logocentric.
Well, it's this idea of that maybe a particular word, or that you really have got towards the truth, that it is really there. So postmodernism tends to be against. So logocentric is a word that postmodernism uses when it criticizes those philosophers who think they have really got towards the absolute truth of something, that logic can really get there to the thing. So maybe those INFPs and INTPs are like really buy into their particular philosophy and absolutely believe it 100% and don't look at other perspectives.
Ben, do you think that we could get to the truth?
I think we can get nearer there, and then also then write a book on what is truth. And it's about getting closer to it, but never actually getting there. And having room for doubt. So it's like this is an area. So it's like trying to get the area of doubt smaller and smaller and smaller about things. So for instance, we know Donald Trump's not an INFP. We can say that pretty much for certain.
Yeah.
So there's certain things. So it's also like I suppose like a process of elimination. But so we mentioned it for them, so people can pause the screen and see it. They've probably already done it. Again, creative function. This is just an example of ESFP. So their creative function would be FE. And you can see here, look at all these expressive things. And these are actually lines from Kersey's profile. Again, love working with people, outstanding at public relations, pleasing others as a performer. Pleasing others, you'd think, oh, that's a bit FE. Stimulating those around them, radiate warmth, lift others' spirits, charming them. And then that is like expressive with emotions. Emotionally expressive right there, intent on pleasing everybody. So these are actually things that are quite similar with ESFJ, but it's done for different purposes. It's to entertain that. Jeff was talking about this in the Hangout yesterday in the tactical intellect, where it's to entertain those people around, to be the center of attention. And being the center of attention is not a bad thing from the point of view of ESFPs. So, and then a slight bit on that, if people want to see, that's, again, this is how Victor sees the FE. And so you can see the similarities in what Kersey wrote. I just took those bits out of the profile, and that you've got similar things there. Knows how to get into the spotlight. That's very similar to Kersey ESFP. And again, using it as a tool, makes acquaintances he can use to his benefit should the needs arise. So that is a classic example of using FE, not for FE reasons, but for your own reasons, using it as a tool. And then this one here for ESFP, the ability to network makes him successful in show business or commerce. I suppose. What are we looking at now? We were talking about NI, because I didn't ask you. Oh, I'll ask Monica about this. So Monica, these NI things on screen in that box, how do you relate to them?
Well, I can definitely relate to something what Leon said about those occipital lobes of ISFPs. I did a test of their energy. Unfortunately, I couldn't take the real brain scan because it's a little bit far away from here. But that part of my brain, it was totally almost inactive. So I would say.
Oh, so you're blind too?
Probably I am.
We're both blind.
I'm really not very good with my surrounding and with physical reality, and I'm not very connected to my surroundings.
Right.
So
that's ISFP out the window.
Well, we could be the blind leading the blind. So, like, how many of us are pretty blind on this chat? You know, we have like how many SE polars do we have on here?
Yeah. But the thing is, they're in their heads. It's that thing of and Imogen before.
Yeah, I think right now there's probably like the apocalypse happening right now, but we don't know because we're just on this chat and we're just paying attention to the chat.
Maybe. Although it is an apocalypse that's not so bad that the internet is still there and electricity is still here. So
yeah, and even if this would be our last moment, I don't know how the apocalypse is urgent, but if it was our last moment, I think it's not very bad.
Oh, thank you. That's a beautiful Monica.
Time well spent.
Okay, so Ben, you wanted me to do something.
Yeah, if you can go, if you can make like spotlight on you, it's like if you could comment on each one, even if it's not got much to say that, but if you commented on each one.
Yeah. Okay. So point 9 is able to predict the turn of events if it knows how to. Well, for me, it's definitely very important to know the causes of everything. because then I get a feeling that I definitely understand the thing better. Because I believe that if you know the cause, you can make more complex understanding.
Yep.
So yeah, I would say I'm able to predict, but I don't actively try to prevent it all the time. Sometimes I just know it, but won't do that anything.
I'll just say that some of these things in here will sound a little bit like INTJ, because NI minus is sort of defined. He's sort of defined NI minus as sort of like a big theme of INTJ, of NITX. So it's sort of like a slightly watered down version of INTJ, because Victor defines his functions based on the types. So he will say NI minus, well, that's what I.I does.
I would say that with point 2, it's probably how interested I'm with this thing, how it is important for me, and if it's not, I just won't do anything, even if it's going to go bad. Or probably I can speak about it or do some warnings or some advices, but that's it. Well, point 3.
I just thought, no, I'm gonna need to go now. So.
Oh, so that's a shame, Leon. But you've made a valuable contribution.
It's great to be y'all. Yeah.
And hopefully you can turn up for the second part when we go through the social adaptation block. So that's going to be TI and SI for INFP and FI and SI.
Yeah, let me know about it. Okay. Bye, everybody. Bye, Bradley. Bye, Monica. Bye, Hannah and Ben. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, Leon. It was nice to meet you.
Bye. Pleasure. Adios.
Excellent. So yes, he has good videos on his channel on some of these subjects, because he has a big focus on life coaching.
Yeah.
I suppose
I'm not surprised by it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like that third one there. I suppose that is what a lot.
See ya. Nice to see you again.
Okay. Hi, Bradley. I can hear you. So Bradley, yes, you can be heard. Okay. So that's great. So yeah, carry on, Monica, with the number 3.
Okay, but you wanted to say something to number 3?
I was just going to say, those INFPs that are particularly strong at this, I suppose when they look at E.I.I, when they look at like an I.I profile or an INFJ profile, they can go, oh, I do that. So it's like, but they don't really, so it's like, this is a similarity between INFJ and INFP, that thing there. But it's I suppose it's how much credit they give to it, where the INFJ will give it a bit more credit, whereas INFP might write, oh, that's an I crap. I don't know. Sort of how do you view NI?
It was for Bradley or for me?
No, for you, because Bradley's gone. I mean, how do you...
Yeah, okay. Well, I definitely would say that times are interconnected. And there is very possible to shift freely from the past to the future, and to also maybe some different, even not existing in reality timelines, because there are just some realities of what could be, what should be. So it doesn't necessarily have to exist to make some effort or to be important to how things will come.
In terms of this thing I'm putting in front of the camera, Dario, we did the NI hangout, and he said that there's a region of brain, that region of the brain in blue, so it has to do associated with possibilities, and he said that with the SJs, they have activity with NI when they think about the future, but they don't connect that with multiple possibilities of how the future can turn out. Whereas you mentioned that you look at the various strands of how it could go and sort of choose between them as to what is more likely.
Yeah, definitely. Various versions of the future, but also of the past.
And also, the SJ mindset, they want the future to be like now, or an extrapolation of now. Because they don't like change, because they like familiarity, because familiarity enables them to, and I did that hangout this morning on it, so if people want to see that about how I think NE works in SJs. I'll just, before you continue, I'll just put a little bit of how Victor defines NI minus and plus there. There we go.
Okay, I will be there in a minute.
Okay. Oh, she's gone away. Oh, well, I will talk about this then. So what that looks like in actuality, I mean, Sana said that she switches between both. So it's not always that INFJs are optimistic. It's more a case of not using the past as much as a guide to the future as INTJs. And INTJs sort of, it's almost like the INTJs are a little bit more away from, and Kersey gives the example of contingency planning, how to avoid these things going wrong. So again, minimizing things going wrong. So the minus really is about minimizing the negative rather than accentuating the positive. I suppose another example of that would be TE minus, which is about cutting out risk, whereas TE plus is about maximizing profits. So this is why ENTJ is more entrepreneurial and ESTJ is more conservative in business. So I will scroll down. I will have to. I've asked Sana already about these 6. I believe I have. Yes. Yes, because you mentioned the thing about being late. So whilst I'm waiting for the others, let's have a look at the other one. Let's have a look at the one for INTP, because I can talk about that. And also wait for her to come back. So all of the bits I relate to, I've underlined. So yeah, analyzing the subject from any different standpoint. So we could say this. What are we thinking about? We're talking about typology. So let's look at different standpoints. Let's look at Socionics. Let's look at Kersey. Let's look at Enneagram. Try and get different angles on the truth. And then there, what are the important factors in a difficult issue? And again, I'm going to now then go to Kersey, who talks about factorial speech in NTs and trying to get all the different things in there. And I suppose a lot of times I digress. And it's like, well, why is he talking about Kersey now? It's because he wants to. It's like, oh, because there's a certain factor from a certain point of view that I think has some bearing on what we're talking about. And then there, structures, classifications, concepts. And again, here, updating the theory. INTP is changing their terminology for, and Victor does it as well, changing his thinking on papers as he updates his school of Socionics. And then, yeah, we can be harsh in our judgments. But going back to, because she is back with us, Monica. Well, she's at least back in the chair. I'll wait until she puts a microphone on. I'll go back to the graphic. There we go. So, yeah. So I suppose the NI of INTJ in Enneagram terms seems a little bit more 6-ish in terms of avoiding things going wrong. Oh, yes, that's it. Yeah, I'll just say one thing. Sorry about that. I just thought of something. The reason probably why NI is more positive is because the counselor, because INFJs go towards the counselor role, and they're not really going to go, I don't think I can really help you. It's like you're positive in that I can help you for the benefit, to see you, like I can help you improve. I can help. So it's like a positive version of change. But also they could probably go, oh, I need to help this person because I can see how they're going down a bad slope.
Yeah, I think that, and I probably already mentioned it somewhere, but I think that NI is more likely to be a part of Enneagram 6, so it will be more like, well, I really don't understand why in terms of MBTI, it's like inferior function mention this NE, because according to my understanding, it will be more like NI, this inferior function. And Enneagram 6, like see possible outcome just in one way, not so many different things, but just one, and trying to prevent it. And for me, it's also more like NI more than NE.
Yes. I think one of the reasons I can see them saying that is because a little bit like the way Victor describes NE minus, where he thinks that because they doubt the point of view, they look at things from lots of different views. And so I think that the MBTI people looking at the 6, doubting so much and looking at something from different views, they probably thought, oh, that looks a little bit NE. So people make lots of different correlations between Enneagram and I think Russo and Hudson put sort of 6 as like NI.
Well, I think he puts it in FI, Enneagram number 6.
For Russo and Hudson?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, carry on. I'll just have a look. I think they might have put... Oh, yes. I think they might have put NI for Enneagram 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
But
almost every other researcher after Russo and Hudson connected with 6 SI.
Yeah, I think that's because of because those people because of the Guardian thing, and as Jonathan said, most SJs have a 6 in their tri-type.
Yeah, but it's also quite of paradoxical because in a lot of descriptions of Enneagram type 6, which I saw, there were like these people are very intuitive. So, and being Enneagram number 6 almost as synonym for a sensor, I just don't think it's necessarily the case.
Yeah, like I said, and as Jonathan says, all Jungian types can be a 6. So
yeah, I think it's also something what Catherine Flower said.
Yeah, I think she agrees with that as well. Yeah.
It's just something like Enneagram 6 equal human.
Yeah, it's like here's a good example. Frequently bring them up when talking about 6s. Laura Miller, Enneagram type 6, INTP, L.I.I, but because of the 6ishness, she can get miscategorized as ISFJ because she's concerned with things going wrong, and she's also self-preservation instinct.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, especially if those people are self-preservation.
Yeah, so I'll just so people know, Russo and Hudson in 96 had the 1 corresponding to the extroverted thinking type, to the TE DOM, the 2 corresponding to the FE DOM, the 3 does not correspond to any Jungian type, although I think it's quite TE. The 4 corresponds to the introverted intuitive type, to the NI DOM, the 5 to the TI DOM, the 6 to the FI DOM, the 7 corresponds to the SE type, and the 8, and this was weird, I even scratched it out because I thought I'm not having it. The 8 corresponds to the NE DOM, the extroverted intuitive.
Well, it's interesting. I would say it will be otherwise. That Enneagram 7 will be NE and Enneagram 8 will be SE.
Because SE DOMs frequently, even many ESTPs are 7 as well. You've got here the 9 corresponds to the introverted sensation type. Yeah, because frequently, because when I was going through the 9 profile, I was thinking this sounds really ISFJ and INFJ. So ISFJ and INFJ for the 9. This idea of putting other people first. And
yeah, and I would also say Enneagram Type 9 is very ISFP in Socionics, because there are a lot of about comfort, a lot of about their body needs.
Yeah, and so folks, ISFP in Socionics is SIFX, SEI. Yeah. Yeah, it does sound very SEI and II in terms of being almost their own needs, making their own needs sort of invisible, because they want the, what is it? They're afraid of loss and separation, the 9. Although I've heard it said by 9s, but paradoxically, this is why I find it so hard to understand 9. They can have an 8 wing or 1 wing, which is like, seems completely opposite from the 9, where you've got a 1 wing where you suddenly have all these opinions about how something should be, or the 8 where you're suddenly not accommodating but will stand up for yourself and give someone a punch. So it seems paradoxical.
Yeah, I think that with Enneagram 8 is even more hard to imagine. I think it can be like very schizophrenical combination for people who are outwardly presented, because if these people are shifting from their core type to their wing type, it really can be interesting.
Yeah, I think with 8, I would rather think, to me, because I don't know as much about Enneagram as I should do, I think it's more useful to know whether they're ESTJ, ENTJ, or ESTP, because they're using power for different reasons. Enforce the rules with ESTJ, or for the hell of it with ESTP, show who's best. And for ENTJ is to get the stuff done. It's like, you're incompetent, I know what I'm doing, you do that.
Okay, maybe we could go back to our...
Yeah, there it is, yep.
It was good detour, though.
Yep. Any valuer.
Oh, yeah. This wasn't very informative, right? This was actually very directive.
Oh, what was directive?
Like, we could go back to our purpose.
But I will accommodate that, though, because you're right. I agree. We do need to get back on track after a good bit. An interesting digression. Do you have more to say? I think, yeah, we talked about the 3.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about 4 or more about 3?
Extracting lessons. Well, I would say I can extract lessons, but I don't have to necessarily use it or applicate it. As with a lot of things with me, I can have a lot of ideas or think a lot of strategies, but I don't necessarily use it in reality. So this is just same. I don't need to make something actually happen to be real, because for me, those things are real, even if they're happening just in my head. And it doesn't mean I would hear noises.
I have a theory about how the NI creative function in INFPs and INTPs contributes towards SE break. So we have stuff here about does everything it can to prevent and mitigate imminent danger. So you're seeing how things can go wrong. So when you're really seeing how things can go wrong, when it comes to taking a risk, no, I can see how that can go wrong. So then that impedes you from acting. And so that's part of the SE break. It's like, you could probably see this conflict could escalate and go somewhere I don't want it to go to, therefore avoid conflict. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, it's more in an indirect way. If you just avoid it, it's more indirective. But yeah, probably I do this more than actively do something like actually do it.
And plus it's going to feed in a little bit to the informing directive thing that we talked about earlier, that we have a predisposition to be informing, go for options, tell people of options rather than to really believe in an option and direct somebody towards it because we know the truth. We have the NI truth.
Oh yeah. I think there that in every opinion there can be true, at least for that person.
Right.
So I don't believe that I have a truth. I think it would sound very, and I just don't think this is a good approach, at least for me.
Right then. So now we can go on to INTP. So the same stuff goes on before. Yeah. So we'll go through these bullet points. So if you go through the ones on the left.
Yeah. So point first, logic of a researcher, analyzing the subject from many different standpoints. Yeah, I would say I have this. I like to do a lot of different researches at my college, and I do researches even in my free time, but mostly about people.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
that is a big thing. So you do it. So the motivation is for NF things. Interestingly enough, you get quite a lot of INTPs doing it. But again, they do it in an INTP way, and they want to understand people through a structure because they've got a little itty-bitty inferior FE where they try to understand people. They want to understand people, and it's through. That's why there's so many INTPs in typology. Linda Behrens, INTP, David Kersey, INTP, Victor Galanko, INTP. These things. And people have argued INTP for Carl Jung, but I think more INFJ for him. And just generally.
Yeah, I think it's just their need to understand people by their strengths, which are just logic, and that they see people as interesting subject to be studied and to be analyzed and to be like conquered by knowledge.
I think some of the people I've come across in Socionics, it's like they get more interested in the model and the theory than actual people.
Yeah. So those are probably people who are going to like the model for itself, but those people who are feeling more, they are going to actually use it to have better relationships and to improve their relationships.
Yeah.
But maybe people who have thinking, stronger thinking functions, they are just good with and entertaining itself. By just the theory and doesn't need to use it to improve anything, not necessarily.
I suppose out of the clubs, the STs are the least likely to get into typology because the SFs, the social club, they want to understand theory and they're going to use it as a tool to understand. And it's quite a lot. The thing is, though, Victor thinks that his particular school of Socionics attracts creative people, creative subtype people, because it's a collection of different points of views and he brings it together. And so we actually know quite a few of ISFPs now, so that's interesting. And also quite a few, so they're interested. It's like Jeff says, I'm not interested in psychology, I'm interested in people. So he'll put up with the theory in order to understand people. So you can get that again, social types. Whereas for STs, obviously some of them are into typology, but I just think they're the least likely of the four. I think they're underrepresented. Like, it's very rare you come across an ESTJ that's interested in typology, and even then, they're not going to be on Facebook much because they're out doing ESTJ things.
Like something what is real and actual.
Yeah, they're not going to spend their time. Not going to spend their time on Facebook wasting time with memes and things like that in groups. So there might be a lot of ones into it that we just don't know about. Whereas groups seem to be full of ENFPs and ENTPs using typology. So that was interesting. So could you give us some examples of subjects that you analyze, and they usually are they for humanitarian reasons? So it's like that 4 with the 5 wing. So what are the subjects that you look at?
Well, so I analyze you all the time as you are speaking to me. Not as you, I analyze people when I come to contact with them. I trying to analyze their desires, their thoughts, their possible motivations. I try to analyze myself too. I try to analyze relationships which people have, why they have them, why it's happening, These are my favorite things to analyze. But also in more global way, I used to analyze, I don't know, I studied philosophy, so a lot of theme connected to them, like religion or some particular systems.
Hannah did the same thing, and so what I would say is that I wrote something about how INFPs use TI, that it's going through the filter of their FI, and then it depends on how well developed they are in terms of something that Annie Linden came up with in NLP about a fair witness position, where they're able to, the more mature ones, put themselves in an objective point of view and entertain points of view that they really don't agree with, but will investigate them. And Jonathan said something very interesting, that internally INFPs can be a lot more open than they outwardly appear, because outwardly they might want to pick a side and stand up for it and not acknowledge, say, the other points of view that internally that they do think about. And so he gave examples of INFP authors that on Twitter are very sort of one-sided, but in their actual work look at various points of view. So that was interesting, because we once did a hangout on how the writers you'd like this, Monica, I don't know if you've seen it, how the writer's type affects their work.
I didn't see it, but I probably should.
Yeah, it's about 4 hours long. And you had Maria in there as well, who's well read. So most of the subjects, so nearly every subject that, so okay, I'll ask you this: what got you into philosophy?
What got me there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, what areas of philosophy are you interested in?
I had philosophy of humanities as my subject, so it was a little general philosophy, and I'm not sure if I should speak about this publicly.
Okay, if in doubt, don't mention it.
Okay, well, because I would have to be sort of critical to the structure of our lessons we had.
Well, yeah.
So, and I don't like to be critical very much. So I will just tell you that I have been always thinking a lot about different things, and I thought that in philosophy I could use it.
Yeah.
And also, there were so many related subjects to psychology, which is my another interest, psychology, sociology. So this was as my dream package, philosophy, psychology, and things like it. So that was the reason. But probably it's really just thinking, but maybe thinking is not a good word, but more contemplative.
Right.
Yeah, because I have done that from my childhood, being contemplative about everything. So, and that was my imagination of philosophy when I put my sign paper in.
So, I'll just let the audience, they might probably already know this, but I'll just say it anyway. So everyone who has a doctorate that isn't a medical doctorate, it's PhD, and that stands for philosophy doctor, because all of these subjects came from philosophy. They all used to be part of philosophy. Science used to be called natural philosophy. Psychology came out of philosophy. So all of these subjects came out of it because it was almost as if philosophy was the thing that you looked at. It had the psychology part and it had all the other parts.
I think it should be probably treated this way, but it's not very interesting these days. I think that a lot of people see philosophy as something what is slowly dying, or something what is in extension almost. That this is not very important. And well, go on.
No, if you go on, then because I was going to ask you which aspects of philosophy were interesting you, because stereotypically I would think that the INTPs would be fascinated by epistemology. What is the nature of truth and how much do we know? Because it's like very TI, and I'm wondering which aspects of philosophy were you into, because that might have a lot of bearing on which type best fits you.
Well, so I think that the philosopher I was impressed at first was René Descartes, and his doubting so much until you can't find the only thing you can't doubt about, because I think this is the principle which I do also, like doubting so much and hoping to come to one thing which have always been there and which doesn't change, so you can't so you can take this thing as the truth. But then I found out about existentialism.
Yeah.
And I think it's more connected to FN, that it will be more favorite more favorite thought system for feelers and intuitives.
To me,
but
yeah, go on.
I think it's more related to Enneagram type 4, and also I liked a lot of those dark, those dark philosophers, like even Nietzsche. It was also very interesting, like that destructive dark part. I think there is attractive for Enneagram 4s in some way. But for me, just existentialism was the most. It was something I could relate to it. Those feelings of absurdity.
Right. So if I was to categorize those subjects, so Descartes, the I think therefore I am, the focus on the self, which is a theme of FI, existentialism, again, which is a focus on the self.
And about their place in this absurd world.
Yeah. And then a little bit now, Nietzsche also tends to attract INTJs, I believe. And Jonathan and I, and actually Kersey Jr. and somebody else, think that Nietzsche was very INTJ. And I just think that look at Jordan Peterson. To me, he is INTJ. Like he has the hots for Nietzsche. And I'm like, come on, Nietzsche, Effie, break, and like Nietzsche had the hots for extroverted sensor. The way he was talking about the Uberman kind of thing. He's like, he had a fantasy about extroverted sensor. So that's why it attracts INTJs, and just the way that, and people would say ENTP for Jordan Peterson. I say, okay, where are the original ideas? ENTP has come up with ideas most of them are not very good, but they're coming up with new ideas all the while in a conversation and diving. I listen to him and I go, I've heard this all before. It's like, oh, you've stolen that from NLP in your self-actualizing course. Right? It doesn't say that he's stolen it from NLP. But of course, NLP itself has stolen stuff. As we mentioned before with Gestalt therapy, they've stolen stuff from other disciplines. So people who all that stuff that Leon talked about.
Yeah, I also only wanted to add that as my bachelor work. I wrote about Albert Camus and how he see a person how he see humans from many different perspectives.
Yeah.
So it was sort of neat to take a lot of different sources, and I really like this, to connect different parts into one cohesive whole.
If you were to look at that project that you did and you were to type it,
Yeah.
would you say that it's full of FI and NE with the comparative analysis and then the focus on the individual and they're being like which options to take, things like that? There is the focus, the subjective focus on the self from that. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just the way that FI is, where it's linked up with the NF temperament, where it goes through who am I, what is my place in this world, these kind of questions that NS go through, and the theme of self-actualization.
Or it can be just someone with really weak extroverted feeling,
Right.
who is included completely out of the world and feel like a misfit. And so he's wondering, what is my place? But I can definitely see room 4 in there.
So what do you think about those other aspects of philosophy? I mean, like epistemology. Are you interested in that?
Well, it's interesting that in that philosophy wheel, I probably sent you that according to those questions, which were very interesting to answering to, I get the result to be an essentialist, which could really be connected to the thing I mentioned earlier, that I'm trying to find an essence in things. So
INFPs do that a ton. It's like what I said before when I did that joke about somebody does that one thing and it's they get to the core of the being of somebody. ESTPs absolutely hate that. When it's like, because it's almost as if, because I think the process is like this. They see the patterns of traits and they believe that they have captured the essence of the person. And that, you're nodding to that. This makes me feel that you've studied philosophy for NF reasons.
Yeah, but also the essence of problems and essence of,
I think a conversation with Hannah would help to solidify your type, to sort of see any similarities or differences, because Hannah also studied philosophy and she's a banker INFP.
Hannah, that's Hannah from Sweden.
Yeah. We won't mention her surname, but that Hannah in Finland. Yeah. She's show when she appears in Hangouts, her little thing says Hannah Phi on her box, her little box.
It could be interesting to meet her.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, like you said there, looking for different points of view. I mean, INTPs like to do that as well, but I mean, David Kersey Jr. I mean, he's like an egg. He's like the most INFP person. You met him, but do you agree that he is very INTP?
Yeah, I do. But he's really trying very much with his feelings. I mean, with his feeling functions, and it's really great. And
yeah, he likes to meet people because they're like.
Yeah, and he's very kind. Yes. He's very kind, and he's very interested in you.
Well, not so much me, but he's interested in. INTPs are interested in the things that other people say. There's a theme of social 5 in INTPs. Every now and then I say something of interest to him, but like I said, he's so far above me in many areas. Like I said, this is a guy who is trying to join. He has come up with his own formatics, to try and integrate together general relativity and quantum mechanics. If he does that, he will be the king of INTPs if he succeeds. no doubt about it, he will be the king of INTPs. All the other people who have tried and failed to do that, and if he does it, and his problem is trying to find people who understand what he's trying to do. So if there are any physics people out there who would like to look at David Kersey Jr.'s work, leave a comment. So yeah, I mean,
Okay.
so to me that does sound more INFP-ish to me, about the things that you were studying in philosophy and the things you were drawn to. It was about understanding yourself. Is that fair to say?
Well, I would say it's a part which is definitely truth, but also I just wanted to use my different style, my different way of being, you know.
Yeah.
And at philosophy, I finally found people who were weird. Who are weird. Like
in certain hangouts, I have been accused of leading people. So if you want to contradict me and say, Ben, I will make the case for the opposite, feel free to do that.
Okay, I will try if I will need.
Yeah.
So now do point 3 or
I think point 2, important factors.
Oh yeah, important factors. Can point out most important factors in the issue.
I'll just say in italics. Maria added that in italics.
I think I can point out things which seem important, and also which seem they are contradicting themselves, or that they are in some that they don't make sense, that there is some mistake in logic. Yep. And well, if I can explain it, it probably, I definitely try, but if I'm successful, definitely you should ask someone else.
Yeah.
But I try to, and
I'll say something from a theoretical point of view that obviously you're going to have, because of what you studied, your TI will be trained up. The things we associate with TI, like logic and reasoning and analysis, will be trained up because of the degree that you were doing, just because those things are necessary to the subject. I suppose the critical analysis. So when you were writing, you may have been writing themes which were NF-ish and humanitarian, but you have to do it in a logical way. So it brings it through, like the critical thinking and analysis and those kinds of things. So, and as Dario has talked about, there is somebody's natural type. Linda Bowen's talks about it. You've got the core type, you've got the core self, the developed self, and the contextual self. And Linda Bowens thinks that the developed self is the real person. So, and the developed self is a mixture between the nature and the nurture. So your developed self is probably gone a little bit further away from the INFP pattern because of these other things. So it's like, say an INFP that got into the realm of, say somebody like Carol Linden, because of her mother, she went into a computing background. And so her TE part would be developed more than what is written in the profile of the average ENFP. So development, culture, education, career is a big thing.
I just still have a feeling that it could be also otherwise, that I'm more thinking and my feeling functions are learned and worked on as time went by. But
to me, it's like, from a temperament point of view, I'm looking at the things that you were interested in when you studied philosophy, and those things that you looked at, like the existentialism, again, it's like, it's FI. Very FI.
Or couldn't it be more like Enneagram thing, the motivation thing?
Yeah, that's the thing. It gets a little bit tricky, because Enneagram 4 is an aspect of FI. But are you very safe in your Enneagram 4-ness?
I'm very safe in being Enneagram with very strong 5 wing.
Right, okay. So the thing is, what I would say is, what Jonathan would say is that INTP and Enneagram 4 are pretty incompatible because INTPs do suppress their emotions, just like the 5 suppresses their emotions. And so there's a key incompatibility there where 4s are very emotional people. You've read all of the descriptions. Yes, there those patterns, but you've read them all. They're filled with emotions. Whereas INTP, they suppress their emotions. Yes, they can have moments where they're hyper emotional.
And again, it's one of those complicated questions where I think it really is important how you look at it from what angle, because you can suppress your real emotions, or but you can try to express them more indirectly, but in the direct way you can suppress them, and you can show other emotions which are not completely true. Maybe you can you won't hide something, or from someone you can hide something. And does it mean that you don't express your emotion, or does it mean you express your emotions? Which kind of emotions? There are, again, so many different ways how to look at these questions.
Leon said there about the Carl Jung FI type, where internally they can be very much about feeling, and he said that externally they could look cold. So in your internal experience, is it more logical or is it more emotional? Because the 5 stereotypically is more logical and more Spockish, and then trying to put their emotions to one side. Because the NTs are, I mean, that's why David Kozer called them the rationals. They love the reason. And then when for the NFs, it's like, well, the feelings are important. So it's because, like I said, all IN types, nearly all IN types are intellectual. So there's gonna be, in terms of 5-ish traits for all IN types, because you've got the subjectivity of the introversion and the abstraction of the intuition in those 4 types. So I think one of the best ways is to just ask, like, compare yourself to other like INFPs and sort of get there and just get that comparison. And this is another example of people not being a type but resembling a type. And then it's about degrees of resemblance. What is the best fit type? So you could like do a graphic of all of your traits and then put a circle. Well, these bits are like INFP, those bits are like INTP. And then if then you were to say, oh, I am now an INFP, it's almost as if, well, that's inaccurate, because what about these other things that are like INTP? So it's like you get a more precise typing, but it's less accurate than to say INXP. Because there's a difference between precision and accuracy.
Yeah, I would say that with secret try type 469, I will finally have to be happy with the X in in those letter codes.
Yeah. So what about this one? And again, number 3. I mean, Victor's got it very. I mean, how much of that thinks in terms of structures, classifications, concepts, which it keeps updating and improving upon?
Well, yeah, I do. And again, it's connected to people mostly.
Right.
For me, it's easier use of or the knowledge of typologies. It really helps me to, I don't want to say put people in boxes, but to have just some basic structure of their characters. And definitely and I actually think that this point is somehow similar to SI in MBTI terms.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's known about SI in MBTI terms that they have like those encyclopedias inside their heads, which they are keeping updating.
I think they pretty much, it's like once they've got categories, it's very difficult for them. Whereas the thing with INTP is they're coming up with structures and classifications which are their own. And then so it's like me with that video.
So it's like their own definitions.
Yes, like I did a video this morning about me talking about how I view what are the functions that are related to S Janus. And it was like, this is what I think, my own particular subjective thinking on it. So that's an example of INTPs, is they will, again, this is how NTs are like SPs, in that they will do their own thing and think their own thing and be independent thinkers. So Victor will keep changing his theories. Like you'll see these papers on Wikisocion from 10 years ago, and he'll change how he does, like his charges system is now different from the way it used to be. Kersey, he changed the names of the types. And his son said, I wish I never taught him how to do find or replace, because he kept changing the names. And when it came to doing the website, David Mark Kersey wanted to use the names in the book Personology, but realized that hardly anyone's bought that book because it was just written for people like me. And he actually said that in an interview. It's just written for people of that type. And he said that everybody knows the types by the please understand me names. So he kept the names as that. So instead of calling it the architect rational, so the final name was, say, constructor designer for INTP. But hardly anyone's bought that book, so he kept with the same names as in please understand me too. And they even use the MBTI codes, even though that's not really part of the theory. They still will put like INFP, INTP on the Kersey website. They don't actually believe in those dichotomies because they don't do thinking versus feeling. And Kersey has written about that. He does cooperative versus adaptive. So that's part of the difference between the two temperaments. How much are you prepared to do something your own way versus wanting to be cooperative?
I always have been more like individualist in these terms. I believe I'm capable of working in groups, but I don't like to. I like to come with my own thing, my original thing, and my way to do things.
Right.
And again, I think it's also connected to Enneagram 24, because I want that results to be and to be, unique and original, like stereotypical Enneagram 4.
I mean, to me, I would think, there's two reasons why I lean more towards you resembling INFP more than INTP, is that you seem to be studying these subjects in a logical, analytical way for humanitarian reasons. So that's one strand. And then the other strand is the Enneagram. Like, for instance, if you were telling me all this stuff like, Ben, I'm a 5, then I would probably lean more towards INTP. So it's like, because there is part of me which is like, Enneagram 4, INTP, does not compute. Now, I am one of these INTPs that actually, for years, you'll see videos where it's got Ben, INF. And there's a video with me where we talk about the 4, and I'm there talking about, oh, yes, I'm an Enneagram 4. And Jonathan's got a big smirk on your face. No, you are not. Because he thinks that INTP, Enneagram 4, does not compute. It's just like Enneagram 5 and NF does not compute. In fact, you can get NFs more studious than Enneagram 5, but the particular issues of the 5.
But I think there always can be a black swan.
Yes, because it's just patterns. That's why I don't believe people are types. They only resemble them.
Yeah.
So you can be an outlier. You can be, this is your E4 dream, even more special. You fall outside the categories.
Yes, so back to the point 3. Yeah. I really enjoy myself to create my own theories. And there was one question, I think, in Kersey temperament, whether you are more factual or more speculative. And I would say I like to be speculative with facts, which also can be more on the base of speculation. So are there really some facts if you can't speculate about them?
Yeah, to me, I see that as extroverted intuition in the way that it's objective. Whereas, you know, like with NI, it's like, oh, I just know. It's like it popped into my mind. I have this feeling that it's right. And it's hard for them to prove it to people. Things that have come about via NI. I mean, Carl Jung wrote about, well, actually, he said in an interview that sometimes you can work out the unconscious reasoning to work out why you got to that result, but many times you have an instinct for something, and it sort of pops into consciousness. It's like, okay, I have an instinct this is going to happen, and I don't know why. Because frequently, that's why INFJs, when you ask them, explain. In fact, Sana is here. So is that the case for you? I mean, you've said this in other Hangouts, but the audience might not have seen them.
Sorry, can you ask a question again?
Okay, the question is, what is that? So Jonathan has talked about with NI, it's like a sense of knowing, and sometimes they even don't know why they know. Do you have that situation? Whereas INTPs, they have to have a reason.
Yeah, I agree with him.
Right.
You may or you may not know why. Usually, if you wait long enough, it starts becoming clear, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels like a leap of faith more than something that makes sense, especially with FI issues, because FI doesn't, it's very unconscious for me. I don't know. I don't know when it comes to psychological distance from people, I don't necessarily know why.
Right. Yeah, gotcha. Because someone with stronger FI, when they're more into, I suppose, when they're more in touch with their feelings, they know how their feelings are altered by people, and then they can then off that, how their feelings are altered, judge the psychological distance. But as you said, you're not in touch with your FI enough to be able to use that as a process to do the ethics of relations thing.
Depends. I think a lot of the time it's a combination of FI and NI, and I can't necessarily separate them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's just this, feels like this automatic process. I have to make an effort to find out the reasoning, which I can do, but it's not instant.
I use this metaphor where, do you think that you are an NI fish that swims in FI and you don't know you're wet with FI?
Probably, except I do know that I swim in it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So are you like that, Monica, with NI? Do you have these things where it's a sense of, you have a sense of knowing, but you don't know why you know?
Well, sometimes I do, but I try to analyze it more.
Right. Okay.
Sometimes it just happens in my dreams, but it's very occasional. So I wouldn't say it's some kind of my superpower.
Right. Because Socionics would say that you would analyze it because you're a lead judging type. And so you can analyze it with FI and TI. Kersey would say that NFs trust intuition.
Yeah. I would say mostly like, oh, this is interesting feeling or interesting impression. Why do I have this feeling? Or why, or how can it, what can happen if this is true, and what if this is true, and you know.
I think what we can do in future is we can go through the aspects of Kersey to find out your Kersey temperament with those particular features of it, where it says, like, for the different parts. So, for instance, in the self-image words, we can get an idea of your temperament because it's more like Enneagram, and then we can find which bits are connected together as sort of a weighting. And in fact, he mentioned on Thursday about, you almost mentioned like a secondary temperament, and Dario said the same thing to me, where he said, like, Ben, it appears that your secondary temperament is artisan. I thought that was interesting because I myself see it as more idealist, as NF, as a sort of a secondary temperaments. So then, what about there, number 4 on the left?
Well, I may be harsh in my judgments internally, but I would probably don't say it directly. But I think sometimes I learned to ask people if they really want to hear the harsh truth. Because if they are ready and if they are interested, I can be very harsh in my judgments.
Right.
And, you know, I also worked as a critical reviewer of books and of literature. And there are times you just have to be harsh in your critique. So it's something I can do, but not always I feel comfortable in this role.
So in those things, when you were critiquing the literature, because this is a way of like trying to tell the difference between INFP and INTP. What were the kinds of things that you focused on in your critique? Because I think INFP and INTP may on average focus on different things.
Well, so I focused on the style of language of those authors. I focused on mistakes in plot. I focused a lot on plot, if it makes sense, and if those characters are real, not realistic, but if their psychology is believable.
Right.
And I focused a lot on those things.
Interestingly, I did something very similar. I would criticize Star Trek Voyager episodes, and it's like, that is not motivated, and I would get very angry because no, it has to be motivated. So I'm going against my own.
Yeah, and I also, if I'm sorry, if it was some book, if it wasn't a first book of this author, I was also trying to focus on how much the author is stealing from his previous work, how original they are, and again, this is probably more Enneagram 4 things, because I really am sort of allergic to cliches and to something what we already saw somewhere. So I could be critical in this.
I got that with Janeway in Star Trek Voyager, would sort of speak in these like cliches and tautologies, and I got a bit like. But then I sort of came to the point of view that there's a lot of people that do talk in cliches, but a good writer can have somebody talk in cliches and make it funny, because it's how people talk. It depends on. So it depends, because the cliches can be used in an ironic way. So it depends if that maybe a little bit smooth. So it depends on the skill of it. But that's interesting. So initially, stereotypically, INTP would look at the plot and INFP would look at the motivation. But I myself was sort of focused on both. And I got very angry, and I got more angry when people did things that were not motivated. So it would be like, why is 7 of 9 wearing heels? Why? The actress wants to wear heels, Joey Ryan, but why is she wearing heels? And then somebody told me, well, perhaps her mother wore heels. And so she's taken after her mother. So it's like, I wish they'd put little things in that to explain motivation. Because when people do things that are unmotivated, it makes it less real. I want the psychological... so this is me being a little bit INFP-ish, because I'm quite close as well. I want proper psychological realism. And that's actually you'll see that in my stage play. You did say that you'd get it, where there's a big focus on the psychology and less on the reality. And that will be a theme. That's a theme in the stage play. There we go, folks. Wilma and Rena on lulu.com. It's linked on the homepage. Not available in any bookshops, not even bad ones.
Yeah, and maybe there will be also a real play based on your book.
Well, thank you very much. If you can engineer that situation, I might change you to someone with a stronger TE. You might be one of those ENFPs that shifted to ENTJ.
But then you have to come to Czech Republic to be on the premiere of the show and put your autograms everywhere.
I will come if it's a huge success. and the people pay for me to come, yes.
Yeah.
Right, so, oh yeah, you talked about harsh in its judgments. So yeah, I wanted to put it to make it the fact that we're not talking about a real person, we're talking about a psychological model. So that's why I wanted to put it. And then we got here, we go back to NI. And again, this is, you saw in the other one, what I can do now is, now we can line them up, I believe. Yes, we can line them up because we can put them next to each other. And this is something I've not done before, but then the audience will be able to see the difference in NI plus and NI minus, and how Victor, the way Victor has defined the functions, carries its way over. So you can see there that the negative, avoiding danger. And so I'll let you find your own patterns as a fellow NP. I'll let you find your own patterns.
Great. So I would think that I can relate more to first point of an I minus.
Right.
But, you know, I think I'm good at knowing how much time do I need, but the reality then it can be different. You saw it many times when I'm late. I know that there are some things which can cause troubles, but I don't solve it really, and then it just.
I do it as well. I do it. Yeah. It's just the thing. I'm just not. EJs are good at. INTJs can get really angry with people who are late. My
husband is always very angry
because they see it as a personal insult, and it's also not just as a personal insult. You can't be but they also see it as I have set aside this time. And
this was a great, not great, but this was a huge problem with my mom, who I believe is some kind of J. And I was so many times late during my teenagers episode, and we had huge fights about this because she wanted me to be somewhere precisely on the minute, and I just couldn't do that. I mean, there were some situations just popping up, so you can't even promise that you will be somewhere in time, because you never know what opportunity will come. But she just didn't understand it, and that clock, you should be able to to be just in time no matter what, and that there is no excuse for you to be late.
You are. I just got a message from Raquel. ENFJ counselor. What I mean is, she does the counseling role, but she's naturally ENFJ. Right, there we go. Because we're sorting out the counseling hangouts with her. So, going back to this. So, for instance, I would see here, you can see how number 2, there's the focus on avoiding the negative. And then extracting lessons from the past. So you've got intuition of the past. And so what I'm sort of saying is, if you were to take away NI minus and NI plus, and if you were to look at them, you can sort of see which is which. And so you learn these things as you look at Model G and the profiles in closer and closer detail. You sort of learn that, and sometimes you wonder how much is from the actual observations of real people and how much is it in there for INTP deductive reasons. In that, well, this type is NI minus, therefore I better put these bits in that sound like that. And so you get that combination with people who are like INTP when they write the profiles. What is an artifact of the model and the definition of the function, and what is real? And so usually if you see something which doesn't strike you as something that you observe in real life, then then it's usually, oh, I don't see that in real life. And then you think, oh, I know why it's in there. Because of the way the model is, because of the definition of the position and the definition of the function. So, for example, in the control position, the definition of the position is that people have a lot of information for it, but not a lot of energy. So you got to think, well, that's going to work its way into the bullet points. Now, a lot of times that ends up being true. So, for example, NI DOMs, they have possibilities that enter their heads, but they don't have the energy to act on them. 1, and 2, they don't want to act on them because it gets in the way of the vision, the envisioning of the NI. So that's an example of the deductive reasoning hits the spot. Every now and then there'll be something which will seem a bit off, but that's just what happens with certain models. And you get that with the sensory introverts, with ESI, LSI, and SI. It's just that with those types, I have to look at them, and I want to go through it in future with Jonathan, where we look at those types in terms of tri-type, because then we can say that those Model G profiles are actually modeling people who really exist. And I have seen some people who are like ESI, LSI, and SLI that are not like any of the MBTI types or Kersey types, but they are like those 3 Socionics types. And I'm wondering, are they like those types because of particular tri-types? So an ISFP who's a 1 might seem a bit more ESI-ish. So something to do in future.
Always have a plan for...
Yeah, have a plan, but don't execute. That's like the E7 things. Like, I mean, I've got the plans.
Yeah, like the vision of patterns.
It's also that when you have so many plans, Hannah has replied, another INFP resembler. Oh, okay. Yeah. Right, so she's been occupied. Right, yes. And then Bradley, he had problems with his internet, because what happens is in certain areas of the United States, with the way the internet is, if there's a lot of rain, it affects their internet coverage, such as that happens to Jeff in Texas. So Monica, if we sort of climax by going through these bullet points on the right, then...
Yeah.
No rush, but it's just like, this is...
Okay, so what is foreseeing?
Foreseeing is extremely NI. It's seeing things how they're going to happen. I foresee that a terrible... It's like, it's almost as if the thing that the INFJ, if you were to write an INFJ character, they would say in like a Shakespearean play, I foresee a time where this will... It's like the prophet.
Like some kind of prophets. Yeah.
You see what is coming. You see what is ahead. So instead of what you see right now, you foresee it.
However, I don't think that punctual is necessarily connected to foreseeing anyhow.
Well, neither do I. Like I said, it's in there because of the way Victor's defined the function.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe the function is related to that, but when it's in a type that's got low TE and low...
I really can't foresee his motivation why to put punctual in there.
Yeah, because it's the function. It's because NI break has to do with the intuition of time. Therefore, they must be punctual. But then when you look at it as a whole, it's, well, this type's TE control and doesn't have a lot of energy, and it's SE break and it's hard to getting stuff done. And so they're especially not punctual if they don't enjoy the thing that they want to do. But when it's something that they really enjoy, they are more likely to turn up on time.
Well, I'm definitely not very punctual.
No.
at all. I'm trying to be sometimes, but it's not my primary focus. But if I should compare it with NI minus
Oh.
0.2, I would say that I do actually more foreseeing than actually doing some concrete steps to prevent or get something. Because the foreseeing, it's more mental, I would say. It's more in your mind. You only need to foresee, and you really don't have to do anything concrete, like the second point suggests. But maybe it's, yeah, but for me, the second point in NI minus sounds just more something you will do in reality.
Yeah, I mean, that right there, fast-seeing and punctual, that is something that's straight out of the definition rather than the type. So it's like, again, it's deductive reasoning. It's like, this type has NI plus, I define NI plus like this, therefore it is fast-seeing and punctual. Now, another of the things what it's going to be is Socionics sees this type as, well, sees both types as I, little j. They are a rational type. Therefore, actually, what have we got here? Right. Oh, she can attend. If I get this right, everyone will see Raquel. And this will be her debut. Yes, this will happen. Will she appear? Right, I have done it. Right, she might appear. There we go.
Okay.
I sent you a message. Okay, she should appear. She might appear.
Great.
So, we are on tenterhooks. So yes. Here she comes. Hi, Raquel.
Hi.
So, yeah, we are being recorded at the moment, and we are just coming towards the end. We have been comparing NI, and we were just saying that Victor's written there fast-seeing and punctual, and we were saying that that's because of the function, but that's not really the case with INFPs and INTPs. So
I'm punctual.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, but that's the thing, though. You're punctual more because of EJ. That thing, because you've got the Janus going on.
Oh, so we have J and P now contrasting in here.
So we were going over the roles before, where we were saying with Raquel, we were looking at INFP and saying that they were good in the mediator role of working with people, reconciling conflictors, alienates, whereas you are more towards the directive role with the NI. Okay, I see the goal and I can push them towards it with charisma.
ENFJs and ENFPs as cousins. We share similar traits, but we're just a little bit different. And you're right on what you just said.
Yeah, it's that, and it's good. I mean, it's like as Sana and Monica point out, there's differences in the way the functions are defined between MBTI and Socionics, but you don't have that problem with Kersey, and so there's so many similarities because we've looked at again the and them being about that's about relationships, and MBTI would say not FE, but Kersey, like I said, Kersey's not doing functions; he's just looking at the types as a whole because he had a background in Gestalt. I don't know if you've studied that, so when he studied psychology in the United States, all of the Germans had come over, and so he learned from the German Gestalt psychologists. And he was saying that quite a lot of them, when they came over to the United States, they actually ended up quite poor because they didn't know the language, and they had these great minds that had problems getting teaching positions.
So what you're saying is that the Kiersey focuses more so on the relationships?
For the NFPs, yes. I will, in fact, I don't mind digressing. I don't care. The audience, we've already seen this. Well, I don't care because I want to show Raquel. So people will. So the diplomatic role variants. So you got there. They're the directive roles, and they're the informing roles. So that it's like seeing multiple options with the NE, the FI wanting to be on the same level and getting rapport, that kind of thing. But going towards role variants. So for you, it would be here for teacher idealist. There you go. Naturally able to take control.
That happens once or twice. I'm familiar with the experiential theories, but I'm not so knowledgeable in delineating all of the differences between MBTI, Socionics, and the Kiersey. But I understand what experiential methods are. I understand what the experiential theories are.
Yeah, because so for example, so what MBTI would do, it was probably lean towards. So for this bit here about this ethics of relations and things between others, some MBTI people might put that in the FE bucket, whereas Socionics is like, it's about rapport and the feeling of connection, the feeling of shared values and beliefs, the sort of function that's involved with the perception that somebody is your soulmate by that empathy connection that's based on that perception of similarity. Oh, that's also part of NE. I should have mentioned that, because NE is perception of similarity as well. So I should have said that it's not just the FI with NFPs, but you've got the subjective aspect and the perception of similarities. So maybe the NFPs find the similarities between the other person and themselves and then focus on that and other things. So
I think SI should be also good at finding similarities.
Yeah, that's the thing, that when I did that video this morning on my own, where I was like, how much of it is SI? I think it helps though, Monica. I think you're right in that SJs have good memories. And so they've got a lot of things to find connections to. If you forget everything you learn and you don't have it in your mind, then it's hard to make the connections.
SJs don't forget anything. My ESFJ, and she doesn't forget anything ever.
Especially about people and birthdays. And Cozy wrote, I talked about it this morning, he showed that bit, and when he wrote who's been born, who's died, and of what, just that the phrasing was funny, and of what.
Maybe that's where the value, maybe that is how I became ENFJ, is because that in itself indicates like a priority on relationships. And obviously that's part of the ENFJ function, is to be driven towards relationships and understanding relationships to understand the self. So that's probably where that comes from.
It's because Socionics really can overthink things, but they would say it's in Carl Jung, where the dominant function has a sort of shadow side that you're aware of, but you sort of ignore. So it's like he gives the example of, if the INTP was completely, if the TI DOM was completely unaware of a TE, their theories would just float off into the air. And if the TE DOM didn't have any TI, that just wouldn't be able to analyze the facts, just wouldn't be able to do anything with them. So they have that other side to it. So I mean, you have access to FI stuff, but I suppose you put the FE stuff ahead of it. So what would that be for you? What would you consider FI stuff and then FE stuff?
Well, first, you're asking the wrong person, because
okay,
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Everything. So I suppose what it would be for ENFJ is that they would concentrate more on the needs of other people, the psychological needs of other people, and they may push aside their own needs and wants. Because you once mentioned that, and it's the thing with the ESFJ as well, with extroverted phalang, so much attention can be put on other people and the needs of other people that they can forget themselves and maybe get themselves into the role of helping other people, but they're still aware of those themes, because it's like NFs overall. It's like identity, purpose, self-actualization. So the balance would probably be that NFPs are more into that, but they're also people as well. It's just they tend to focus more on the filter of viewing things through their own experience. And maybe with the NFJ is just that focus on other people and helping other people in more of a directive way.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There is FI is more of I have a feeling, an internal feeling that's derived from my own awareness and not necessarily something outside, and then that someone to check. Well, what I find is that, so I have this internal feeling.
Yep.
And I need other people to clarify my my internal feeling and to kind of gather more perspective on my internal feeling. Ultimately, when I make decisions, I will go off the intuition, but it is not without consult of other people.
The way you described that sounds. I just looked at the ESFJ profile, and maybe that's like with the TI in ENFJ and ESFJ, is they appreciate the clarification from other people, usually either INTP or ISTP. And Megan Levota's talked about that on her channel about ENFJ.
Now, what's interesting is I also do it for, it's more of like a group harmony. Like I need the community to make decisions. I feel best about my decision when it matches what the community says.
All right. Yes, that is quite different from. In fact, wait a minute, Sana, can you please put forward the case for Socionics, FE, and FI?
Which part of it?
Well, if you briefly explain to Raquel the ethics of emotions thing and the ethics of relations thing.
Okay. FI, ethics of relations, is the ability to maintain and determine psychological distance with people or with things, causes, pretty much anything. It's a matter of, does this repulse me or does this attract me? FE is the well, it's emotional expression as well as the ability to observe and influence the emotional dynamic of space or people or group or individuals. There's a lot more to both of them, but that's the basics. Although for some reason I do see some people disagree with that definition of FE, which I find really weird because it's kind of stereotypical socionics description.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that a TI reason that helps to support those definitions is that if you look at INTJ, you can say they're really bad at appearing into the emotions of other people and being expressive. So yeah, because that's like the idea is that that's the thing that they're weakest at. FE. Big nuts.
I hate INTJ. INTJs. It's weird, and they're exactly like that.
But they're sort of like their saving grace is once you get past that harsh shell, they've got that loyal FI person inside. And it's almost as if sometimes with them, I suppose with the less developed ones, is they're just cantankerous to other people because like they're being arrogant. But with other ones, it may be for FI reasons where they really believe in something and they're not happy with other people believing stuff just because it's the convention. And so they get annoyed with conventional thought. And if you want an example of a conflictor between INTJ and ESFJ, think Spock in Star Trek as INTJ and McCoy as the ESFJ doctor. So just INTJ will criticize him for being ruled by his emotions, and the ESFJ is like, have some feelings, Spock. What are you, made out of stone? Those kind of things.
Ben, I would like to only ask Sana, if it's possible, about do you think about the difference between FI and FE? It's the stereotypical case, and I think it's. I already talked to Ben about this. It's about motivation and group behavior. I mean, this is one of the most this question is appearing a lot in various kinds of MBTI tests, and it's asking if when you are in a group, if you are trying to include someone into the group, and if you are trying, then you are FE, and if you are not, then you are FI. But I think that motivation is very important here, because it really depends on why you are trying to include this person. And for example, I try to include them because I don't want them to possibly feel bad of not being included, but not because of the group harmony, or not because of I don't want to be anyone who is distracting the group somehow. I'm thinking more about that individual. So
can you just, what was the question?
If it's more according to your understanding, FI or FE?
I see FE, the emotional dynamic of FE. I see that more as a tool, as in it can be used in any kind of situation. You could even use it to kick somebody out of the group. It's not about what you do. It's a tool that you use to achieve your goal, whatever that goal is. And that goal is going to be people related, obviously. But if you want to include somebody, you can use FE to do that. But that doesn't mean that this is what FE is. See the distinction?
Yeah, this is probably because, I get it. This wasn't a question in Socionics test, and there's obviously another way of understanding functions. This was more related to MBTI.
In Socionics, in Socionics, FI has a lot to do with, because it has to do with maintaining psychological distance. It's also going to influence that kind of a group situation. If you have an FI relationship with everybody in the group, you can do this with FI as well. So it's, it's not, I wouldn't use that question for typing. I think it's more about whether you, okay, well, I think FI and FE kind of measure different aspects as well. FE is typically the more fleeting in the moment emotions, and FI is like, has to do more with long-term sentiments that don't vary as fast.
I'll just
because
say,
they refer to different aspects of the psyche.
Yeah, I'll just say that in Socionics, FE is dynamic, and whereas when it's static, it just lasts longer when it's static. And Victor gave the example of both ESTPs and ESTJs can get angry. It just takes longer for ESTJs to calm down. So
I don't know. I don't know if it has to do with being static that it lasts longer. It's just more like static will go from one full state to another full state, while dynamic will slowly over time just kind of change. It's more like well, basically, I don't think it has much to do with how long it's going to last, because you can change your state 3 times in a second if that's if it fits the situation.
Yeah, so I also think this question is very good for typing, and it's already on my list of ambiguous questions or questions to further discussions, because they are more about motivation, which is not asked in the question. So
Monica, right?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
I actually really like that you're incorporating the aspect of motivation, and both what you and Asana are saying. I see it in the example I gave about group harmony and collaboration, and how it's so interesting because I will seek out the group and their opinion may soothe me for a little bit, or their like, let's have a problem, and their suggestion will soothe me, but internally I'll still have that distance or whatever with my feeling. So the feeling that I have personally will linger, although I will feel some alleviation because of what the group has said, or even like the motivations to work collaboratively. Is it to soothe my own like external environment, because for whatever reason group harmony is very important to me, and I will sacrifice my own internal discomfort for group harmony.
So this is a little thing in Socionics where for ENFJ, SI and FI are in the inflation avoidance block. So the idea is that these things can build up. Maybe there's like internal FI things, and it can build up and build up and build up because you're putting other people first. And then maybe ENTJs and ENFJs tend to get stress-related illnesses. That's part of the SI break. So it's just this inflation block where it builds up. And for INTP, it's like, we learn all this TE stuff, we listen to Peter Schiff, but we can't get it done because we've not got the energy.
And it's just so, like Monica was saying, the motivation. I am more motivated to make the group happy than myself. Like I will literally for my own psychological distance just to make the group happy, and that's just what I'm motivated towards in doing. I like in terms of relationships, I will express my own discomfort in intimate relationships, and if I will not make a decision to leave the relationship until all of the group agrees that there is distress.
Yep. That's this thing that's in, the control function. It's like you have a lot of information for it, but you don't act on it because it's the opposite of the lead function. So because FE is so strong in you, you're aware of the FI stuff, but you don't act on it. When it comes to ethics of relations, I think that, okay, it's like, so FE can have the same effect in terms of, so for you, Raquel, you're looking at, okay, the group and the group harmony. So I think with ethics of relations, I think the mechanism is different. I think the mechanism is FI in that, so you've looked at NLP and rapport. So people have that sense of connection based on a perception of similarity. And so it's like if you have someone who's an FI type and they meet someone who they perceive as similar, it's like, wow, I have met my soulmate, and they have that empathy and connection. And I see that as a very FI thing. And I give the example of, imagine two fans meeting a celebrity. One of them's an FJ, and one of them's say INFJ, and one of them is say INFP. And I would imagine that if they meet their fan, that they meet their star, the INFP will have their feelings about the person interfere with their judgment of the interpersonal distance, because they use their own feelings to judge that interpersonal distance. Whereas I think INFJ, or someone who values FE more, will look at the emotions coming off the person more and judge how the interaction is going based on the emotions more than the actual feeling of connection and rapport. So
that's a really great description. I see it very clearly.
Right. Thank you, because I've been trying to trying to explain to people about sort of like how the sort of because we did this whole hangout, it was like the relationship between Socionics ethics of relations and MBTI FI, and I was like trying to say, well, the MBTI FI could be like a small piece of it, and it's almost as if MBTI FI is the cause and ethics of relations is the effect based on that subjective process, the subjective feeling.
Hey, this has been really good. I've already learned so much. I've only been...
Well, you could teach us a ton of stuff when we do the counseling hangouts. That'll help Sana, yeah, because more of that in future, folks, and we won't get distracted again by. So yeah, so back on track. So we will get back to the Yeah, break. So yeah, the four functions in so the four shadow functions, Raquel, for ENFJ. So you will use extroverted intuition. You can explain things and draw parallels and create metaphors and have ideas, but it's not for their own sake. It's to feed the FE. And I suppose if you so do you think you're good at explaining something to somebody, and if they don't quite understand, just coming up with a completely different explanation just on the spot?
I don't want to talk about that. I have had so many people like, I know what I'm talking about, but they're like, you're not explaining that well, and I'm like,
okay. Okay, that's a little bit of, but that's one of these things with the creative function that you don't know whether it's strong. And then shadow function, we talked about the break function with SI, putting other people first so much. And so I think with ENFJs, it's to put other people forward so much, and they try so hard to achieve things for themselves and other people. They have the stress-related illnesses, and for ENTJs, they're just workaholics and get the stress-related illnesses. And also they have that self-image of like the field marshal CEO, and if they don't quite get there, and quite frequently Enneagram type 3, so it's reality has to match up when it's like stress-related. And again, we talked about the control function, the opposing personality in B terms, the ignoring function, and oh yes, the role function. So you can actually switch and probably be pretty good at TE stuff, because
I actually I'm gonna steal something that you said, and I'm gonna make it into a video series that I have.
Good, that'd be great.
Because I have actually convinced people that I'm ENTJ, and like 5,000 people on the internet believe that I'm ENTJ, and I'm not. I was doing it to advocate for the ENTJ women in dating, right. But I've convinced people that I'm ENTJ. I'm not.
I think part of it is Socionics assumes, a lot of these typology systems assume that everything is symmetrical, but I think that with the FE DOMs, with ENFJ and the SFJ, first of all, they have a load of energy. And number two, FE is so much towards other people's needs that if anybody else wants to do the TE thing, they will adapt and do the TE thing as well. So it's like if you're in a work environment and it's a TE atmosphere, okay, I will do that as well. And I will be fantastic at TE and everyone will think I'm an ENTJ.
Yep. Yep. Incognito, man. That's one of our skills as an ENFJ, to be a reptile, to be a chameleon, you know, to fit in.
And I suppose in Enneagram terms, such a person might get typed as Enneagram 2 wing 3 with a strong 3 wing, driving for success.
Well, I naturally have that in my Enneagram. I'm a 4-3.
Oh, okay.
But I had when I was typing as ENTJ, I was also typing as a 2 wing 5.
Oh, I can see that in tri-type. It's like 2-5 with the yeah. So we will get back to, because we're going to get to these little bullet points, and we can do, because oh yes, Raquel, if I can interest in you in, we could do the model G of the NFs, and it would be like each position, but then going through each of the 4 ones to sort of like make it clear. So it's like, this is the role function in ENFJ. So example there with TE. This would be, say, the role function with, say, Monica, which would be TI, which then means that she can do all of this logical, analytical stuff when she's studying philosophy, but it appears that she's doing it for INFP reasons. Or you could say with INTP, like me, they get in touch with their internal feelings and things like that. It's an area of the personality that somebody sees as a weakness and as a chore. They feel deep down that really they should improve it. Whereas with the break function, it's like, this function's stupid and I don't want to improve it. So with INFPs and INTPs, when they hear about extroverted sensing, it's like, I don't want to take reckless risks and act impulsively. That's stupid. So I'm proud of my 1 out of 16 for Dario's SE inventory. So,
well, only to that chameleon part, which Raquel mentioned, I would say it could be connected to that 3 wing, because they can be very chameleonic, probably more, in some way, more than Enneagram type 2, even though it can be discussed, but if you're saying you're 4 wing 3, and probably isn't it hard for you to stay authentic? Don't you feel guilty then?
Why are you reading my mind? This is exactly what I struggle with.
Ah, that's the thing. That's part of the inflation avoidance block, where it builds up with the FI, because FI wants to be authentic, but the FE wants to fit in and put other people first, and then you've got the role function as well, and it all builds up and I have stress. Oh no, I'm not being authentic. I need therapy.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. I'll watch my own YouTube videos and put therapy on myself.
It's crazy how this stuff, when you really look at it and you really understand it, it's true. Like these are parts of my personality that have been here since I was a kid, like since I was a teenager, and you take a test and it tells you these things, and you're like, that I can see that. I can see exactly how that plays out in my life and the things that I struggle with.
Yeah, that's a way of looking at it, is like the themes of it rather than as a box. Like
Right.
with that's the way Sana looks at Enneagram as I think she doesn't see them as types. She sees them as, go on, Sana, you can speak for yourself.
Yeah, I see Enneagram more as I see the goal more as getting rid of your Enneagram type, because that means that you overcome the core fear.
Yeah, that's in Buso and Hudson. Like level 1 is the level of liberation, so it's quite Buddhist.
Yeah, I remember us discussing this in the last call, and I did agree with Sana. She was saying that they're showing different aspects of our personality to us, and opportunities for resolve, but also for empowerment and encouragement, you know, going along with the strengths thing, because I do dabble in astrology type stuff. I think it's interesting, just like MBTI and temperament. And so the 4-wing 3s, we have that, I think it's in the 4, we're romantic. We are kind of flagrant, big, and that's actually one of my signs is a Leo, and they're also known to do that too. So I look at the themes within each area and test, and I'm like, okay, that's what's common in all of these things.
Maria has said that when you really look, I don't know anything about astrology, but I remember what she said, that when you really look into astrology deeply and the various houses, then you can actually see that there's a lot to it. It's just that when you have the version that's horoscopes in the papers, that it gives it a bad name.
Yeah, it's very deep. Just like you know, I started this journey as looking at MBTI about 2 years ago, and then I started to learn about Socionics and the functions and all that stuff. It was so much deeper than just the surface of what's presented publicly.
And what have we got here? Yeah, the goal is to get rid of this. I think Tom Condon describes it as to wear your Enneagram style loosely. And I think you'd like Tom Condon, Raquel, because like he came from an NLP background. And so he like uses Enneagram sort of like as an organizing framework for the NLP techniques. So it's like these types tend to have these issues and these are the solutions. So he's counterphobic 6. And he said that he used to jump on things. He used to jump on passing trains. And then Shannon, ISFP Enneagram type 6, she said she used to do the same things. Like just jump onto passing an ice cream truck, and I bet the guys must have thought, hey, you're making us look bad. This is not fitting the gender roles. We did this fasting and punctual. Oh, that was it. That was the bit I moved there. Victor put that in the any box, and I moved it there. So that's my own subjective thinking. I'm thinking, I'm not having that. I'm going to put it in there, but I will tell people that I moved it there. So I think that is more NI. That's that anything about trans, I'm thinking that's NI.
Guys, I got 1 more minute. I got to get
okay.
Functions, but it was so great to meet you.
Excellent.
And I will be on the next one I can. Just let me know when we're doing
Fantastic. Fantastic. And we'll try and set something up for counseling.
Great.
It was good to meet you.
Good to meet you, ladies. And I'll see you guys in the next one.
All right.
Great. Bye.
There we go. People might think that was a digression, but it was a good digression. So the purpose is not to stay on point. The purpose is to have a good hangout. There we go. What about that on number? Okay, what about number 3? Do you briefly enter a trance?
I think you already saw it for many times. my trance, and I'm not sure if it's only a brief trance. But no, yeah, because I'm trying to really, I don't know if it's actually thinking about what I'm going to say, but sometimes it's just spacing out.
Okay, I've got some words for you. And this might put you into a trance, but this might do briefly. People can relax. People can relax. This can be easily achieved. You can notice a certain sensation. Now, sometimes when I read that, that can put me into a slight trance. And I'm like, I can hardly move. because it's so vague. And the way that, and so if any sensation is, because anything you mention is actually there. People can relax. This can be easily achieved. You can notice a certain sensation. So various patterns.
Well, me and feeling sensations, it's always very weak. So
yeah, but like, so he's written about this publicly that David Kersey Sr. was really into. He really admired Milton Erickson, and of course in the private hangout he said some other things about that. The son, but that's like INTP looking up to INFJ. And I suppose in his area, because Kersey was in the area of counselling. So there we go. There's an example of somebody enacting a role that they were not predisposed to. So David Kersey Sr., strategic accommodator, enacted the role usually that is best for INFJ, and that is the role of mentor counselor. So that is an example of people performing roles that are not their first, not what they are best at through their natural predisposition. So you can also look at Kersey as a theory of various vocations and how they're connected towards different intellects. And we did that yesterday in the tactical hangout. So what about number 4?
Okay. What does mean dwelling on the past? Because I definitely taking the past into consideration, but also the future. I not only, it's not like I was staying in the past, but I can think about it and also think about the future. And I think this is similar in some ways as the 0.3 in N.I. minus in this chart, because I really can be in both equally. I can dwell on the past, but I also can see, I don't think it's contradicted so much.
In this book here, The Enneagram Made Easy by Barron and Wagley, they gave an example of the 4, and it was a man with a scarf, and he looked like an NF4, and it's like he remembered every single insult. And I thought, that's like me. Every single insult from the past. So again, if they're 4, they might dwell in the past. Every single insult they will remember.
Yeah, this is true. I have to sign this too.
So yeah, go on.
But I still think that you can dwell on the past in some way and still think about many different facets of the future. I can't see the direct contradiction in here.
You can see that always to be aware with Model G is, and I noticed this in about the last year. Why does it say that? It says that because it's NI+. That's why it says that. Good at, and there we go. And I've underlined this because I sort of might relate to that bit. Good at predicting consequences of an action, provided it understands the action's intrinsic logic.
Yes, I would say or at least I'm trying to predict consequences, bad and good. Just predict whatever consequences there could be.
I think all the I little j types, all of the TI and FI DOMs, but I think that the intuitive ones are going to go a little further into the future, because one of the dichotomies in Kersey is that the intuitives are more likely to be remote than immediate. Although with the SJs, they are remote, but again, they want it's going to be the same as the future. So it's like their view of the future is very similar to what it is now, whereas the NJs are much better at seeing how things can develop.
Well, yes, I just returned to the point 2 with forcing, and if the point 5, probably they meant it in this way, like you're good at predicting consequences, like something what will happen for sure. But I mostly see more possibilities again. Not the only consequence which is possible, but a lot of possible consequences in many ways.
Right. So
does it make sense?
If you say it again, please.
Oh yeah.
I'm being honest.
Yeah, I know. I just trying to say that I'm not trying to predict one concrete outcome, but mostly various difficult possible outcomes.
Yeah, that's aligned with, and actually that's something that Jack Aaron said in one of his earlier videos in 2013, where they would, because he did this series when he went through all of the functions, and I actually think he explained them very well, especially his FE example, where he said that FE was not just the ability to read emotions, but to change them in other people when it's stronger. So back to your point. What was your point again? I forgot. It was.
Well, I think maybe we should go to sleep.
Yeah, I forgot what your point was. It was good, and it made me think of something.
I know. It was basically something about extroverted intuition.
Oh, yes.
MBTI.
Yes, and Dario did it with the brain, where it's like an area of the brain. So basically, it's like this, folks. Dario gives people all of these tests, and those people that he has typed as, and he doesn't use the MBTI to type people. He uses Berens-Nardi stuff, which is very much like Kersey, so temperament and interaction style. So he's very sure of the people's personality type, their best fit type, as he calls it. He gives them tests, and so when it's all questions to do with like transcontextual thinking and things like that, that part of the brain, oh, it all pops up and lights that part of the brain. And Dario says it doesn't just say that area of the brain only does that thing. He says that part of the brain aids in that particular thing. And usually what happens with the brain is usually it does other things as well. One part of the brain gets associated with one kind of function, and then other things happen. But he says, and so when he said that the intuitives think about the future, there's a part of the brain that lights up when people think about the future. So it's like, he'll ask them questions like, envision yourself in 5 years, what you'll be doing. And that region behind the right here lights up. Region T6. With the intuitives, that lights up, and the region next to it, P4, which is more to do with various options. So they see more of the various options in the future. Whereas the SJ is, this was in the NI hangout, the third Galenko hangout. And he said that it tends to be 1 or 2 options because they're not really looking at the possibilities. So it's like fewer possibilities, and then they extract it into future. And so this is going to be one of the problems with NPs, because we see more possibilities of how things could unfold and all of the options. It's very difficult to choose one and focus on it. And also, because we have a nose for novelty, we tend to get a bit bored and want to switch to another option. Is that fair, Monica?
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
That's okay. That just matches me.
Okay, let's do briefly the last.
Okay, we'll do the last ones then, because you're even an hour ahead of me. Consequences. There we go. cautious, self-efficient, frequently lost in thought.
Well, as
That's
you
me,
can
frequently
see
lost in
right
thought.
now, I was frequently lost in thoughts right now. So definitely lost in thoughts very often. Self-sufficient, I would say so. And cautious. Well, I have 6 in my trait type, so yeah, I probably am cautious. But if there is something what really interests me, I can take risk in order to do it.
So this is Victor's short definition. So this is the official ones. That literally is the official definition translated by Maria. Manifests in contemplative wait and see behavior. So that's the short definition that SHS uses for NI. And their short definition for FI is a function that shapes modest and empathetic behavior. So he associates FI with empathy, or rather ethics of relations with empathy. So I did. I'll just say. So when I talked about empathy, so somebody gave the example of sympathy is more that kind of thing where you can feel it's almost okay. You have an emotional reaction to somebody without any kind of, it could be somebody completely different from you or an animal, but you have sympathy because you react to the emotions. With empathy, it's more that thing is when you have a strong connection with somebody and then something happens to that person, you feel it more because of that empathy. And so certain things like this where people become more relatable. So if you had a situation, say in the 1960s, where you had the SJs, say, watching a black person being built up by the police, but they knew that, but they felt that that black person was like an SJ like themselves, they would feel that more than if that was, say, an artisan, because you've got that connection and bonds there. And you had quite a bit of that with Martin Luther King. Why did the SJs feel connection? Because he talked about the Constitution and he talked about the Bible. They connected over those things. So they felt a stronger connection to him than, say, somebody like Malcolm X, who was like, oh, this guy's dangerous. So you see what I mean? Like that strength of connection. When you have that connection, you feel it more. So that's the FI part. So sympathy is almost irrespective of the person. So like I said, you can see sympathy for an animal in pain. But that's not empathy, because it's not a perception of a common bond, like a soul in. So it is ultimate expression. Empathy is like a feeling of a soulmate.
Yeah, so if you're putting this in this way, I would say that my sympathy can be very awkward in this kind of way. Like I'm trying to express some emotions, but not always I feel it's adequate, and that reaction it's just can be very awkward. But with empathy, there is no such a thing. It's just what you naturally have or you don't.
I'm just looking for it in the old dictionary. Probably here we go. Oh, it's just got here. Sympathy, feeling or showing sympathy, showing or inspiring approval. And then we've got here compassionate, caring. These are the synonyms and that. I've got the combined thesaurus and dictionary. Let's look for empathy. Yeah, empathy is like, because Kersey has a big section on empathy and please understand me too. And again, it's something I looked at in Robert McKee's book because he was talking about this. He was talking about the connection between the audience and the hero. You have to make your audience relatable. This is what Aristotle wrote. He wrote the protagonist must be like us, but better. But that thing there, like us. So it's like if you're watching a film where something happens to somebody and it's like an ESTP, right? You're not going to feel as sad as if it was somebody who was more like you. So that's what I mean about the bond. You see what I mean? The closer the person is to you, the more you have that connection. And so that's what I mean about the FI aspect. coming in, rather than it just being objectively of, look at that person, they see the pain on their face. I can feel what they are feeling because of the pain shown on their face. Whereas the FI is like, yeah, but they're an Albally STP. So this is what I mean. It's like the connection that you have with somebody, which is FI, which is subjective, and then the objective thing of, look at the pain that's coming off from their face. So that's the way I see it. Like that is the way Carl Jung saw it, objective and subjective. And I realized that Socionics defines it differently, and we've gone over that about. And I got bonus points from Raquel because she agreed with me on that. But you know, there are other points of view that are all valid. So that's part of me being accommodating. So then that's the end of that, and I'll ask Monitor for, so how did your first hangout go that was sort of built around you?
I think it was fine with my cider, and
yes. Very good.
I enjoyed it, really.
That's the main thing.
I'm just sorry for my attention. It was worse at the end because I started to be more absent-minded and tired. And
yeah, but you only did it after I did it, though, and I did it so badly. I asked you to repeat it again, and then I forgot what you said. So yeah. Folks, all right, we are going to go off air, and I'll just say to those people who thought that we didn't do many videos in December, in January. Well, over the past few days, we've got hours and hours of content for you, because I think this one's been 3 hours, and the one yesterday was about 2 hours 20 minutes. So you're getting almost towards 6 hours worth of content, especially with the hangout this morning. So there you go.
And yeah, you can do it as a reality show, Ben and his channel for 24 hours.
No, I don't want to do it that much. No, I don't. And I mean, Emily got burnt out. She's taking February off, and she was doing like 2 or 3 hangouts a day. And it's like, that's for Koki on YouTube. That's why she's taking February off, really. It's like too much. 2 or 3. She'd do 3 hangouts on a Saturday and a Sunday. And it's like, too much. Right then. I hope she's not watching. She's a subscriber. So. But she did a video about, and I've not watched it yet, but I imagine a bit of burnout then.